Chapter 721. Changes according to will. Henyi. Henyi. In Ling Han's mind, he unceasingly comprehended new concepts, which made him unable to contain his joy. He was definitely an extremely intelligent person. Being able to become the Alchemy Emperor in his past life was a clear proof of this. Furthermore, this was without any predecessor's guidance. Yet, he'd still managed to accomplish such a feat in alchemy. Wasn't that amazing? Now, he had focused his intelligence on unraveling martial arts, and dedicated his entire being to reaching the pinnacle of martial arts. Overwhelming changes were happening within his body. All were to be both strong and flexible at the same time. He had both strength and gentleness. This matter might seem easy in theory, but to actually accomplish it was too difficult. Really too difficult. As everyone was used to their current state, it was difficult to break the habit. Further, to allow the body to stretch like the blood-sucking origin gold and possess such elasticity was a qualitative change. Breaking through your limits and reinventing yourself. Within his dantian, the small being that was Ling Han's spiritual infant was keeping watch, its expression serious as it formed multiple mysterious-looking signs. The indestructible heaven scroll had long since been branded upon it, and now the spiritual infant was currently unraveling a mysterious technique and harmonizing from within. It thereby boosted the change in Ling Han. It wasn't clear how much time had passed when Ling Han stretched out the index finger of his right hand. With his left hand, he grabbed his right index finger and yanked it hard. Previously, if he had pulled with his full strength as what he had done now, he would have definitely stretched out the whole of his right arm. Yet now, a strange thing had happened. His finger actually elongated and thinned, dispersing the force with which he pulled by half. However, once the index finger lengthened up to around 30 centimeters in length, it could no longer be stretched. This was the limit. Ling Han could not help but smile. He had succeeded. He had finally succeeded. Although he was still far from reaching the level of blood-sucking origin gold in changing form, this was still an improvement. This was a great progress. Again. Ling Han did not just stay sitting. He was constantly waving his arms and kicking with his feet. Everything was normal at first, but the distance his striking fists and kicking feet could reach was slowly increasing further and further. It was his body that was stretching. Ling Han's gaze lit up. This wasn't simply just dispersing force. Rather, this could give rise to the formation of a completely different battle tactics. Others might have thought that your fists could only reach so far to be able to shoot out origin power. Yet, in actual fact, the distance at which you could strike was dozens of times the distance. Naturally, it would be difficult for others to defend themselves against this skill. Moreover, if his fists and feet could be stretched endlessly, wouldn't he be able to turn any battle into one fought at close quarters? One had to know that he had cultivated body arts, so his body was comparable to that of precious metal on a level higher than his own, and his brute strength was also quite terrifying. With the addition of these two factors, who could be able to fight on par with him in close quarters? However, Ling Han immediately discovered the limitations. Without the stimulus of external force, he was able to extend his body only up to a limited distance. This was similar to a spring. In theory, it could be pulled longer and longer, but this had to be caused by an external force. When the external force disappeared, it would be restored to its original state unless it was broken. The original state of Ling Han's body was the most stable. Therefore, no matter what changes his body had undergone, it would instinctively try to return to this state. Too bad. Ling Han shook his head internally. If he could control his body to change forms like the blood-sucking origin gold, then he could invent a completely different set of battle tactics, being able to stun anyone with a killing strike. He shouldn't ask for too much. Ling Han smiled. Now, he had become slightly accomplished. He would go and battle that array sword again. Ling Han came out of the Black Tower. Fortunately, the array sword did not recover and try to kill him. Otherwise, he would have been doomed. Come. Let's fight again. He laughed and took the initiative to rush over. Xiao. 7 flashes of light shot out from the sword and sliced towards him. Ling Han gave a humph as his body continued to move forward. He did not even use the demon fairy step anymore, allowing the 7 flashes of light to hit him. Now, he was going to use this sword to sharpen the soft side of the indestructible heaven scroll. Pu. In this way, the 7 flashes of light naturally sliced towards him head-on. The clothes on Ling Han's chest were torn open as the sword flashes slashed at him. Ling Han's chest actually stretched back visibly by 3 meters, 6 meters, even 15 meters. And at this time, the power of the 7 sword flashes was finally exhausted. Pang! Ling Han's chest bounced back. His face was slightly pale. Practicing on his own was one thing, but to do it to such an extent on his first real attempt was something that made him feel it was slightly unbearable. 3 bones have been broken and internal organs have also sustained slight injury, he thought. After all, this was an attack from the array sword, which could sever even a deity transformation cultivator in half. Yet he had taken it head-on. How could it be possible that he wouldn't have to pay the slightest price for this? However, what made Ling Han happy was that this time he hadn't been forced to retreat even in the least bit. He had turned his body into countless combinations of particles. The impact of the sword flashes had all been directed to the upper body to be dispersed. Hence, the lower body naturally did not move. It could be done. He had a strong confidence that he would be able to conquer this treasured sword. Again. The indestructible heaven scroll circulated within his body. The body of diamond was claimed to be unbreakable. Even if it had received serious damage, it could automatically heal. It was only just a while. Yet his broken bones had already fused back together as if he had never been injured at all. He kept on attacking, but human power was limited, after all. After he had endured too many strikes of sword flashes, he couldn't help but fall back. Otherwise, he would really be cut into 2. The smile playing about the corner of Ling Han's lips was getting wider and wider. His understanding of softness was getting deeper and deeper. There was improvement with every strike sustained, and the injuries which he had to bear were also getting lighter and lighter. He had learnt to use his body's many particles to disperse the force which he had to sustain so much, so that he wasn't just pulling it vertically, but also being able to expand horizontally. Before, he had just turned himself into a spring. Now, it was a dough that could not only spread in one, but in every direction. Hence, when his chest was again struck by a sword flash, it was visible that his entire chest was expanding like the surface of water as it was paper, becoming incredibly thin. However, in this way, the attack which he had absorbed was reduced by at least 90%. At this time, the hard side had also exhibited its formidable power, trying to hurt his body with only 1/10 of the power. His body bounced back and returned to its original state. Ling Han's face was slightly pale. This time, he really wasn't injured. However, the previous state was not his normal form, so it had brought him much strain. The transformation could not be maintained for too long. Otherwise it would also collapse. Or so he thought, and immediately laughed in spite of himself. If he could stretch up endlessly, then wouldn't he be able to effortlessly absorb the attacks on the level of the shattering void tier? Human power was at times exhaustive. This was in line with the Tao of the world. He shook his head, his eyes fixed on the array sword, and smiled. I shall conquer you within 3 strikes. Xiao, as the thunderclap 9th heaven spread out, he moved to strike once again. Pang, 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 pang. The sword flashes were as bright as if they were ablaze, and slashed towards him madly. Ling Han had no fear. Every part of his body was swelling to absorb the force behind the attack without his retreating even half a step. On the contrary, he had even stretched out his right hand and forcibly extended it for a distance of 1 meter. After absorbing 3 consecutive sword flashes, his hand had finally caught the hilt of the sword. Hong, a terrifying killing intent suddenly struck at Ling Han's consciousness. Chapter 722. Revere Life Sword. Henyi. Henyi. This sword existed for killing. The sword's blade had been engraved with array patterns, and they were all meant to kill, capable of cutting through the void. Now, the array patterns had transformed into sword intent, and penetrated Ling Han's consciousness. Wang, the spiritual infant, rose up and entered into his consciousness. It sat in the center and guided the sword intent. Wrapped by the indestructible heavenly scroll, it emitted a bright golden light, appearing dignified like the arrival of a great man versed in Tao. The killing intent was suddenly contained, and then began to dissipate like melting snow. The indestructible heaven scroll, the supreme existence. Indeed, the exhibition of only a small portion of it already allowed him to ascend the ranking that contained all the powerful prodigies from the last millennia. Even if this formation sword was incomparably terrifying and could cut through the void, Upon coming up against the indestructible Heaven Scroll, it could do nothing. This was a battle between the different levels of divine sense, and had nothing to do with battle prowess. This was a qualitative confrontation. Would the indestructible Heaven Scroll be inferior in quality? That had got to be a joke. The killing intent had disintegrated. The formation sword no longer shone. It now looked no different from an ordinary sword. It was done. Ling Han couldn't help but burst out laughing. He had not only conquered a treasured sword, but had also made great progress in his body arts. The rewards this time were huge. He held the formation sword and examined it closely. He was extremely intrigued by the array patterns on the blade. But it was too complicated. He had only looked at it for a short while and felt his head was pounding, making wang, wang, wang sounds. It seemed as if his head was going to explode. He quickly averted his eyes and contemplated for a while, yet he couldn't help but feel shocked. This was because he had taken a good look at it for some time just moments ago, yet he unexpectedly couldn't recall even a single array pattern, as if there was a mysterious force at work that had erased it. Ling Han did not bother about it. He retrieved the sheath. However, in contrast, though the material of the sheath was of top quality, it completely couldn't be compared with the sword. The material of the formation sword was a rare metal of level 10, and the value of the array patterns engraved on the blade was more likely to have exceeded even level 10. The material used on the sheath was only of the 9th tier, which seemed extremely crude in comparison. It made sense though, since the scabbard was not meant to be used for battle anyway. To use a level 10 rare metal to forge the sheath would be extremely wasteful. Moreover, even if it was made with a metal at level 9, it would already make one feel it had soaring opulence. The number 1 killing sword in the world? Ling Han saw 6 characters written on the sword. Would this be the name of the sword? It's again the number 1 in the world. Isn't this a bit high profile? It doesn't match my character. He threw the sheath into the Black Tower. This stuff was useless. It would be better to melt it down and forge it into an arrow to better make use of its characteristics. You have such strong killing aura. Henceforth, you shall be called Revere Life Sword. Don't kill lightly. It is natural law that all living beings are to grow, so you can't arbitrarily deprive other creatures of their right to live. Ling Han laughed. He shook the sword gently, and martial intent surged within. Wang, a few array immediately patterns lit up. When he delivered a slash with the sword, 10 sword flashes suddenly appeared. Pu pu pu. The walls around him were instantly left with 10 shallow slash marks. It's so powerful. Ling Han was speechless. This stone chamber had withstood the battle between him and the Revere Life Sword without collapsing, which showed just how sturdy it was. However, now that there were already slash marks left behind after a single strike, this also proved the formidable strength of Revere Life Sword. He slashed once more with the sword. This time, sword rays swept out from the sword. Hong, a dent about 30 centimeters deep, suddenly appeared on the wall. However, the amazing thing was that the wall actually began trembling, and the slash mark very quickly disappeared. Ling Han was shocked. This tool pavilion actually had self-recovery abilities. Hiss, this tool pavilion was a treasure in itself. Ling Han felt tempted. If he could also keep this tool pavilion, then wouldn't all the things inside be his? Just at this moment, the originally closed door suddenly opened. He had obtained the treasured sword, so there wasn't any reason to stay here. Ling Han stowed the Revere Life Sword into the Black Tower, side by side with the Demon Birth Sword. Both blades held midair in suspension. Yet, Demon Birth Sword actually lowered automatically slightly, not daring to be on the same level with the former, showing the dominance of the Revere Life Sword. Swords had spirits of their own, and would also compare with their peers. Ling Han stepped out of the stone chamber. The stairs were in front of him. He looked around and saw that there were several stone chambers on this floor, but each one had been sealed tightly. He tried to open them, but neither using fists nor a sword could break the doors and allow him to enter. Helpless, he could only take the stairs to go down to the next level. On the next floor, there were again several stone chambers and a flight of stairs. He didn't try to break through the doors, but headed straight down the stairs. Previously, he had been on the 5th floor, so he had to continue going down 4 flights of stairs before he finally returned to the ground floor. He stepped out and saw that there were still many people around, eager to try out the martial stone. Ling Han! Ling Han! Hu Niu jumped over and immediately dived straight into his arms. She hung onto his neck and said, "You've been away for so long. Niu missed you to death." Ling Han didn't know how long he had been cultivating inside the Black Tower, so he turned around to ask the approaching Zhu Xian'er, "How long have I been inside?" 20 days, Zhu Xian'er informed him. "Oh, so long." Ling Han only felt that he had just blinked his eyes, and it hadn't even been a day. How could it be that 20 days had passed? "Did you guys obtain anything?" he asked with a smile. Yes. Hu Niu immediately jumped out of his arms. Niu got something fun. She suddenly summoned an enormous pair of scissors that was slightly taller than even herself. It was entirely red in color, and when the scissors were closed together, they resembled a coiled dragon that was covered in scales. The pointed tip was a dragon's head, vivid and lifelike. "Go!" the little brat shouted, and the scissors immediately flew out. They actually transformed into a red dragon, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws while emitting formidable divine might. "Oh, Dragon Feng shears! Lord Rabbit has seen this before in the notebook left behind by my ancestor," Rabbit said. According to legend, a true dragon died in this realm, and as the dragon's blood spread out, it spawned countless treasured medicine, while the dragon's bones turned into mountains and became what is known now as the Holy Land for the 5 great sections. Furthermore, some of them have become deadly zones of this realm, and hold great danger. The only thing that did not change was the dragon's fang. A long time ago, a great master of martial arts got a hold of this dragon fang and forged it into the Dragon Feng shears. When stimulated fully, it can possess the power of a real dragon's bite. Everyone was shocked. Such a treasure was actually obtained by Hu Niu. Incredible! Incredible! This treasure would arouse the interest of even shattering void tier cultivators. Ling Han smiled. He had obtained the Revere Life Sword. Even if it was to come up against Su Xiaoran's ultimate saber, he would have the ability to counterattack. Furthermore, Hu Niu also had the Dragon Feng shears, so the abilities on their side had made great progress. Zhu Xian'er, Wenren Qian, and Yuan Cheng he had also obtained their rewards. However, they had obtained only level 8 spirit tools, which was a far cry in comparison to Ling Han and Hu Niu. Sure enough, the results they achieved on the Martial Stone directly affected their rewards. With this, Su Xiaoran and Dong Linger, who had concealed their strength, would definitely die of depression. Rabbit had also obtained a treasure, but it adamantly refused to say what it was, which made everyone else curious. Ling Han did not see the Rain Emperor or Mu Rongqing. He asked Zhu Xian'er and got to know that the two had actually been here, but they had already left. Now they each led a team and became the boss. Their actions for the purpose of the overall plan had to be reconsidered. Ling Han. Jia Ming appeared, staring at Ling Han, his eyes emitting a bloody light. Chapter 723. Well done. Henyi. Want to fight? Ling Han asked laughingly. He had now mastered the art of coupling toughness with gentleness where they complemented each other to create an ideal mix. He was completely fearless even if Jia Ming was a whole cultivation tier above him. "Humph, it's not a fight, but my executing you," Jia Ming retorted with a prideful air. So what if the secret techniques mastered by Ling Han were superior to his? In the end, without attaining a certain cultivation level, and without attaining the level of major accomplishment in the secret techniques, he could still totally crush Ling Han. Then let's have a fight. Ling Han naturally was not afraid to fight. "Handsome little brother, what are you fighting over?" It was at this moment that a sweet and charming voice rang out. The terrifying aura struck unsuspectingly, making everyone feel as if there was a rock pressing down on their chests. It was so difficult to bear that it made one only wanted to spit out blood. The throngs of people couldn't help but part, and there, amidst the crowd, one could see a tall and slender yet well-filled-out figure of a beautiful lady. She sat upright with her legs laid out horizontally atop the body of a huge demonic lion. The demonic lion was so imposing and fiercely powerful that it was alarming. Its entire body was covered in scales, akin to those of a dragon's, and its presence was even more terrifying as if it could shake the stars and constellations off the skies with just a roar. In reality, it could indeed accomplish such a feat as it was an existence of the shattering void tier. The Lunar King had arrived. Who is this? With such overly terrifying presence. My heart is about to explode. Moreover, what an astonishing beauty. Look at that bosom. It is so voluptuous that I definitely would not be able to hold it in with one hand. Wouldn't it be great if I could just have a touch? Pah! Someone had cast lustful looks upon the Lunar King, and unwittingly spoke those lewd thoughts aloud. Immediately, his whole head exploded, leaving the headless body to rock and sway a few times before falling down with a loud crash, thoroughly dead. When the others saw this, they were all overwhelmed with shock, staring at the Lunar King with deep fear. That was because she had stretched out her long, slender and fair hand. Her finger pointed at that person, so evidently she was the one who had killed him. The problem here was not whether that person's strength was strong or not, but rather the majority of the people here all possessed very powerful backgrounds. Making such an unbridled attack, aren't you afraid that it would give cause to disaster? Only a handful of people knew that this particular mistress was in fact at the Shattering Void tier. There was no need for her to fear anyone in this realm. Furthermore, for him to have dared to have the audacity to utter such lecherous words to an elite of the Shattering Void tier, shouldn't he be killed? Even if he was a true disciple of the Heaven Sword sect or the Absolute Saber sect, he would have definitely died in vain. How could the Shattering Void tier tolerate such humiliation? The Lunar King approached riding on the demonic lion, and even Jia Ming, who was totally clueless about what it was like to be filled with respect and awe, took a few steps backward, unable to equal the Lunar King's aura. His future achievements were a different story, but at least at present, he totally could not compare with the Lunar King. I won't allow you to have any ideas on Hu Niu's Ling Han. Hu Niu waved the dragon fang shears as she roared at the Lunar King. The Lunar King could not help being dazed for an instant. You have actually obtained the dragon fang shears? What rarity! Wasn't it claimed to be unattainable? Even I was not able to obtain it those years ago. If I had wanted to obtain it, how could it be possible that I would fail? Her beautiful eyes swept across as she remarked, "The lot of you have all used the stone of martial intent, I presume? Ha 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 ha, just telling you, I had once left my name inscribed on that stone tablet, the 99th place in all the history of this realm." Ling Han's group were snickering secretly at present. This master's name had actually been already struck off from the list. The sudden emergence of three super geniuses, Ling Han, Hu Niu, and Jia Ming, all at the same time had immediately forced down the Lunar King's name. The Lunar King was still unaware of this, and looking upon the odd expressions on everyone's face, asked, "You don't believe me? Kitten, lead the way, let them have a look at my name." The demonic lion was already made completely submissive, truly as if it was just a kitten. It carried the Lunar King to the front of the stone of martial intent. The Lunar King, apparently filled with pride, pointed her finger at the stone of martial intent and said, "At that time, only I and His Majesty made it onto the list. The other 7 kings all merely managed to trigger red light, and absolutely could not compare with me. Where did my name go?" She stared fixedly at the stone of martial intent. Where was her name on the 99th place? Even in the 100th place, she also did not see it. After such a long time, this piece of lousy stone has malfunctioned? She mumbled. No, it has been forced down by others already. Ling Han opened his mouth. At the very beginning, I did indeed see the Lunar King's name on the 99th place. What, who would dare to force down my name? The Lunar King became indignant at once, directing her line of vision to the list as she searched upwards. Very quickly, her gaze fell upon Jia Ming's name. Immediately, she snapped in a murderous manner. Which fellow is named Jia Ming? Schwa, everyone's gazes settled unwaveringly upon Jia Ming at the same time. It was a conditioned reflex. Words from the mouth of an elite of the Shattering Void tier would draw out one's subconscious reactions and influence one's will. The expression on the Lunar King's face instantly turned dangerous as she cracked her fingers, making popping sounds. So you're the guy, how dare you force down my name from the list? Tell me, should I chop you into 3 or 5 pieces? The color drained from Jia Ming's face. No matter how capable he was, to challenge an elite of the Shattering Void tier was beyond his capabilities. Furthermore, that person had also made it into the list on the Stone of Martial Intent before. And now, she had even attained the battle prowess of the Shattering Void tier, which was deemed as nearly achieving the ultimate battle prowess that the Stone of Martial Intent predicted. How formidable was that? Even if all the prodigies of the Earth Dragon sect that had been sealed were to appear at the same time, even the strongest among them could not possibly match her. In a flash, the Lunar King's expression turned extremely dark as she questioned, What you mean is that I am very old already. Senior. Senior, your sister. The Lunar King leaped down from the demonic lion's body and charged towards Jia Ming, beating him up fiercely. With her strength, she naturally overpowered Jia Ming and thrashed him heavily. Ling Han was laughing inwardly. The Lunar King was exceedingly sensitive about age, and even Ma Duo Bao, an emperor, was also beaten up. He actually dared to call her senior and even especially emphasized the age gap between the two. He had really run straight into the sharp end of her spear. Jia Ming felt very wronged, but he could not open his mouth to refute at all. He was beaten by the Lunar King till his nose was bloody and his face was swollen. He felt he has totally become a punching bag. His only fate was to be brutally abused. Only when the Lunar King was feeling somewhat appeased after beating him did he groan earnestly as he covered his face. Senior, not only I have made it into the list, there's also Ling Han and that little girl. Senior. The Lunar King's rage, which had calmed down with much difficulty, surged forth once again. Which part of her looked like a senior to him? Hit again. Pong, pong, pong. After a heavy thrashing, the Lunar King smacked her hands and felt her mind and spirit had eased. She looked towards the stone of martial intent and said, "Which places are the both of you at that you can also surpass me? Fuck." She had caught sight of Ling Han's and Hunyo's names, and they were ranked at the second and the first place, respectively. Jia Ming looked on and couldn't stop the corners of his mouth turning into a sneer. He ranked on the 51st place and was already beaten up so badly. Since the two of them ranked first and second, could they still stay alive? Ha 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 ha, you actually made His Majesty, that egoistic maniac, drop into the third place? The Lunar King suddenly burst into hearty laughter after staring dazedly for a while. I am about to laugh myself to death. That fatty claimed his battle prowess was unparalleled with such extreme pomposity that he even gave himself a title of first. Unexpectedly, he has actually been forced down to the third place already. Wahahaha, I really want to go back and get a look at the expression on that fatty's face now. I will definitely make him lick my shoes. Well done. Chapter 724. A Shocking Glory. Henyi. Henyi. At this moment, the anguish in Jia Ming's heart must have magnified to an immeasurable extent. They had all similarly made it into the list, and collectively forced the Lunar King down from it, so why was there such disparity in treatment? He was beaten up, yet Ling Han and Hunyo were actually praised with a well done? Well done, your sister, it's so unfair. Yet Ling Han was dumbfounded as he remarked, this first was actually that fatty Ma. The Lunar King nodded, then added, yes, it's precisely that fatty. But His Majesty was not a fatty before. On the contrary, he was an attractive and charming handsome man. If he had deigned to humbly court me, perhaps my heart would also be stirred. Every fatty had good potential. Ling Han could not imagine how that fatty Ma, whose horizontal width was comparable to his vertical height, had looked like when he was as lean as a lightning bolt. He also did not dare to imagine it, as Fatty Ma's looks were already ingrained into his mind no matter what. He could not relate him to being slim. You lot sure are impressive, to have actually forced His Majesty down the rankings. Just so you know, that Fatty's combat strength is truly fearsome. Even if we, the 8 kings, fight against him together, we would not be his match. A light glinted in the Lunar King's beautiful eyes. No wonder His Majesty has such high regard for you lot that even I also feel envious. That Fatty Ma was actually the holder of the first place since the beginning of history. From the current perspective, it was not wrong to say that. That was because he had indeed already attained perfection of the Shattering Void tier, and it was certain that he had also mastered the secret techniques he knew to the highest degree, far beyond what Ling Han and Hunyo could compare with. After all, he had spent so many years on cultivating extensively. Ling Han forced himself to stop pondering the fact that Fatty Ma also used to be lean. His heart was filled with great astonishment. The number one since ancient times. What kind of notion was this? Wrong, wrong. If Fatty Ma was so strong, then why had he sealed himself in the first place? Given his strength, he could already have split open the skies at that time. It was not like one's strength would advance with this seal. Even if sealed for 1,000,000 years, one's cultivation would still be how it was 1,000,000 years ago. And one would even age somewhat due to the change of time's flow. It was incomprehensible. Ling Han lowered his voice and said, Lord, what connection do you all actually have with this ancient kingdom? Didn't you know that this ancient kingdom was called Purple Moon Kingdom? The Lunar King responded laughingly. Ling Han paused and blurted out, "You've all established this ancient kingdom?" "Of course. At that time, His Majesty led us, the 8 great kings, to unify the whole realm. The so-called 5 great sects were all beaten into a pulp, and we even snatched clean all their amassed resources, leaving them with no means left to seal any elites, breaking off their inheritance with no way to pass it on." The Lunar King guffawed while reminiscing as she continued. "But someone from their upper ranks actually managed to hold out. Then when we awoke, that previously defeated foe appeared so energetically again. How preposterous." Without inhibition, she did not lower her voice and was clearly heard by the people in the near vicinity immediately. And there was no one that wasn't flustered with shock at hearing it. So it turned out that this empire was so powerful that it once unified and ruled the whole realm. Even the 5 great sects suffered a crushing defeat, and they were making a comeback now. No wonder their strength was horrifying. In just a few short months, they had already taken possession of nearly half of the lands in the Middle State. Moreover, we still have 4 kings who have yet to awaken, and that is why we are unable to destroy them all in one go. This was already alarming enough. Only 4 kings had awakened, yet they were already so ferocious. If all the 8 kings appeared together, it was indeed possible that they would once again conquer the whole realm. Furthermore, Ma Duobao himself had yet to make a move, and he was a real elite whose battle prowess had emerged superior over multiple generations. Ling Han mulled over it and asked, "Why did you all seal yourselves for so long?" "The time was not right." The Lunar King shook her head. "The natural environment was too poor at the time. Martial arts had yet to achieve the peak, and power of the nation had also not reached the highest degree, as such." She made a gesture that signified splitting open the skies. "Although His Majesty's battle prowess has been the strongest in history, but he still could not compete, so we had no choice but to seal ourselves, awaiting an appropriate time to arise." Now was indeed a good time. The martial arts environment was heating up again, and the overall ability level of the realm had reached the strongest level in these 10,000 years, and so, naturally, the stronger would be the power of nation that they could borrow. They would still have to possess strength. If they could not beat them with one shot, then they'd fight again after a nap. "Given what you said, this place is yours?" Ling Han asked. "Of course. Why else did you think I chased after that damn alchemy pavilion?" The Lunar King humphed. "That thing which has sprouted legs is an alchemy pavilion?" The corners of Ling Han's mouth twitched momentarily. After all, it was his first time witnessing a building that sprouted legs and flew. It had practically gained a life of its own. That alchemy pavilion was forged from a divine metal. In fact, it is actually equivalent to an alchemy furnace. Furthermore, it has been nurtured endlessly by the precious qi of the earth that His Majesty has gathered. The longer the period of time, the stronger the effect, the Lunar King continued. But it was also because we overslept that divine metal has been nurtured for too long by the precious qi of the earth, which allowed it to gain sentience, and it couldn't even recognize myself or the Flame King. Ling Han probed. "Then you all still did not succeed?" "No." The Lunar King was furious. "The divine metal has practically gained a life of its own. Taking account of the time, it has been about 2 millennia at the very least. Being nourished by the precious qi of the earth day and night, this damned alchemy pavilion also became considerably impressive. From the looks of it, if His Majesty did not make a move personally, there would likely be no one in this world that could deal with it. Wasn't that putting Ma Duobao on too high a pedestal?" But upon further thought, he was the #1 in battle prowess since ancient times, so there would never be too many compliments and praise that he deserved. Ling Han couldn't help being curious, and asked, "What kind of alchemy art was that?" He was the alchemy emperor, and naturally was very much interested in anything related to alchemy. "Tai Ji star asterisk 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 asterisk," the Lunar King answered. There was an immediate change in Ling Han's countenance as he said, "That is a divine pill." High-level heaven-grade pills were considered divine pills. There were even some shattering void tier cultivators who were still unable to consume them, as their bodies would explode from the sheer strength of the pill. The Tai Ji star asterisk 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 was one of the highest quality alchemical pills among them all. It was capable of increasing the strength of one's divine sense. But exactly how strong, that Ling Han wouldn't know, because he was not at all familiar with the hierarchy of the immortal grades levels. "That's right, it was part of our plans to consume it after successful concoction. But, unexpectedly, that damn alchemy pavilion actually dared to ignore me. The Lunar King was practically about to die from fury. Ling Han smilingly said, "No need to rush, there's still a long time to go." Even if the 5 great sects were suppressed, opening up the skies was easier said than done. All the people had to submit willingly. If not, power of the nation would merely be akin to poison. Oh right. Since you've managed to enter the tool pavilion, what kind of precious tool did you get? The Lunar King casually asked. Ling Han took out the Revere Life Sword and answered, "This tool here." The Lunar King inhaled sharply as she responded, "The #1 killing sword has actually fallen into your hands?" And yet, the fatty actually claimed that there was no one in this world apart from him who could obtain that sword. "You're so lucky, kid. This precious tool was forged by His Majesty's own hands. Also, it is the only one, its mighty ability is unimaginable." Chapter 725. Fighting Jia Ming again. Henyi. Henyi. Ling Han couldn't restrain his mirth. Fatty Ma was really not being modest, proclaiming himself as #1, and even the sword he'd forged was also the #1 sword in this world. He weighed the sword in his hand and remarked, "This sword is not bad." Of course this sword is not bad. It was no ordinary level 10 precious metal that was used to forge it. Instead, it was made with a small portion of divine metal as its foundation. Then on top of that, His Majesty added a hefty portion of level 10 precious metal, refined in every way possible, and finally shaped it into a tool, the Lunar King pointed out. Furthermore, His Majesty even engraved on the sword a short note. "If it were not because I don't wield a sword, I would certainly snatch it back." Ling Han asked curiously, "Then, what kind of array do the array patterns engraved on it form?" "Haha, I leave it for you to ask that fatty Ma about it yourself." The Lunar King spread out her hands, not willing to clarify it. Ling Han mused to himself, Fatty Ma ought to be a master of array arts, and with his skill in array arts as support, his battle prowess could suppress the prodigies of all time, and be grandly placed as the first place. Just what kind of heights has he actually achieved on the array arts that he was powerful to such extent? Since the Tai Ji star ***** could not be recovered, I have also lost interest in this place, the Lunar King continued. I am not in the mood to waste time, as I have to locate the other 4 kings as soon as possible. When the moment comes, the 8 kings will unite. I feel excited just thinking about it. Let's go. She mounted the demonic lion and rode off without a second thought. Such a huge treasure, yet she actually appeared not overly concerned with it. She was truly nonchalant. It also further showed that she had strong enough confidence. She couldn't care less about what others referred to as treasures. "Young man, this is for you." The Lunar King tossed something over. Ling Han caught it and saw that it was a crystal rock. He extended his divine sense inside, and instantly, a 3-dimensional map appeared in his mind. Every nook and corner, any place, could be infinitely magnified to display even the most minute of details. Hey, this was a map of this mystery realm. Ling Han recognized it immediately. At the beginning, there was a wide plain. Then it was the sea area, followed by plains again and desert. It was utterly identical to the places he had passed through before. There were also signs marked on the map, which indicated that the region up ahead was the Beast Garden. He already knew that this current region was the Tool region. It had originally been a massive land of flames. But in the wake of the decline of the Purple Moon Kingdom, the flames had burnt up everything, turning the land into a desert. There onwards, it was the Herb Garden, where a lot of spiritual herbs grew, and situated at the rear of the herb garden was the imperial palace of the Purple Moon Kingdom. Inside it, there was a place called the Langya Library, and there lay hidden a lot of secret techniques that had been gathered by the Purple Moon Kingdom all those years ago. The Lunar King even specifically marked a line of words, Earth Overturning Seal. It was a mystical power. Ling Han couldn't help but be moved. He had already mastered 3 mystical powers, and was profoundly aware of the power that a mystical power held. Naturally, he would not mind learning another mystical power. Although it was said that one should not bite off more than one could chew, there was also a saying that declared an abundance of abilities would not weigh one down. If it was unsuited for him, then he would merely not need to spend too much time and energy to study it. Ling Han withdrew his divine sense and uttered, "We should also go." He wanted to take a look at the herb garden to see how flourishing this herb garden was after at least 2 millennia. You think you can still leave? Jia Ming humphed, his eyes sweeping across with an unfathomable and frosty gaze, not bothering to hide the killing intent in their depth. Ling Han gave out a slight "oh" and said with a laugh, I have actually forgotten about you, pardon me, pardon me. To be honest, with your current appearance, I truly could not recognize you. Filthy mouth. Jia Ming's gaze riveted upon him as he declared, Do you dare to fight me? Tisk. TSK. TSK. A deity transformation tier cultivator is asking me whether I dare to fight him. You have the gall to even mention it? Ling Han laughingly countered. Jia Ming humphed coldly nevertheless, then responded, You and I are of somewhat similar age. Your level is inferior to mine because you are too useless, so whom could you blame? Ling Han let out a snicker. Indeed, a fight of the same age or perhaps a fight of the same level could all be considered to be fair. Just that with age such as theirs, such geniuses indeed could not afford a 1 to 2 years gap. For example, Ling Han already had the confidence that he would advance to the deity transformation tier before the age of 20. By the time he was at Jia Ming's age, who knew, maybe he would already be in the heaven tier. Absolute fairness did not exist in this world. It appears that you would not give up if I do not fight you. Then let's fight. Ling Han entered the bleak and boundless desert, turned around, and directed his gaze at Jia Ming. The latter had left the Tool Pavilion much earlier on, and had been lying in wait for him all this while. Naturally, this was conveying a kind of determination. I would not give up until I crushed him. Jia Ming sneered as he took out 2 curved blades that were shaped like the crescent moon. The blades were very short, and as he held them in his hands, it looked like his fists had grown pointed horns. While they did not hinder his punches, they also rendered destructive power. Was this the spirit tool he had gotten from the Tool Pavilion? He similarly was ranked on the ranking, though not as astounding as Ling Han and Hu Niu, but the treasure he got was certainly also not ordinary. Ling Han did not wield the Revere Life Sword, for he wanted to test out the strength of his defense skills after he had cultivated the art of coupling toughness and softness against the battle prowess that was near to the limits of the deity transformation tier to see what kind of manifestation it would bring about. Merely a spiritual infant tier cultivator, and you dare to challenge me. Jia Ming charged forth in large strides, striking out with a fist. His martial intent was shining brightly, leaving behind a band of light behind his fist. Ling Han drew up both his fists, wrapped with his origin power, and launched himself into an exchange of blows with his opponent. Both have cultivated body arts, and naturally were also more inclined to fight at close range. In terms of body arts, Jia Ming was considered to be quite accomplished, and his physique's endurance was as tough as precious metal of the same level. Furthermore, his level was in fact originally higher than Ling Han's by a whole cultivation tier. Therefore, with regards to the level of physique strength, both parties were similar. But what about the soft aspect? Amid the exchange of punches, their arms have transformed into wave-like lines, which were unceasingly surging. If these were to graze the body of any ordinary person, the strong vibration would have definitely shattered their bones. However, these two still remained in fine condition, making use of such wave motions to continuously disperse the power behind every blow they were struck with. Jia Ming was surprised that Ling Han had also grasped the art of coupling strength with gentleness. Previously, when they had been exchanging blows, Ling Han had merely displayed the aspect of strength. His physique had upped another level, and in addition to the art of coupling strength with gentleness, he was confident he could suppress Ling Han. What he did not anticipate was that Ling Han's level had also elevated, and had grasped the soft aspect, making both parties' defense level revert back to being of the same level once again. Since the defense was of fairly equal standing, the deciding factor would be the strength of their attacks. Jia Ming grinned, then gave off a laugh, revealing a ruthless demeanor as the weapon in his hands suddenly emitted a coldness akin to that of ice and frost, bringing with it terrifying energy that slashed straight towards Ling Han. Ling Han firmly withstood this strike, but suddenly there was a spurt of blood, and a scar was left behind on his elbow. He couldn't help glancing at that weapon and noted that it should be a spirit tool of an extremely high grade. Although Jia Ming was unable to display its full strength, it had still dealt damage to his physique. After all, his opponent's strength was of a much higher level than his, and with the activation of his spirit tool, he was naturally inflicted with an injury. However, the power of the indestructible Heaven Scroll was not merely reflected by the sturdy aspect of the physique, but also its ability to recover. Clearly visible to the naked eye, Ling Han's injury disappeared in the blink of an eye. If it weren't for the fact that Jia Ming had stared fixedly at his wound all the while, perhaps he would not have even realized he had injured Ling Han earlier on. Such ability to recover could only cause Jia Ming's expression to change drastically. Chapter 726. Bloodline of the Earth Dragon. Henyi. Henyi. A smile broke out on Ling Han's face as he gloated. So it appears that this time, there would only be grievance for you. He inadvertently revealed killing intent in his gaze being provoked by Jia Ming time and again. He'd lost his patience. So long as he was able to kill him, he absolutely would not be merciful. Jia Ming humphed, knowing that merely depending on the difference in cultivation tiers would not be enough to suppress and crush Ling Han. He gave out a low howl, and a weird sound escaped from his throat, while blue veins were throbbing throughout his body. It was as if there was some kind of terrifying thing trying to break out from within his body. Ling Han dared not underestimate the battle prowess of his opponent, as he had gained the approval of the Stone of Martial Intent, prevailing over thousands of prodigies through the ages to rank 51st. Although this was not the peak of Jia Ming's current battle prowess, still, he could not be careless. Underestimating whichever of the prodigies could very likely plant the roots of destruction for oneself. 4 styles of Devil Serpent. Jia Ming bellowed, aiming at Ling Han as he went straight for the kill. A fist struck out directly to attack Ling Han's lower abdomen. Ling Han raised his hand to block it and bang. He struck his palm down on his opponent's wrist, but the latter seemed to have turned into dough. It actually took a turn and wound around to strike again at Ling Han's chest as the sharp blade in his hand shone with a cold light. Ling Han was astonished. Could it be that this guy's bones were actually soft? How could he change the form of his arm in such a way? This was not merely just grasping the soft aspect, but was instead some kind of secret technique. It was as if he was a serpent. Yes, precisely like the bones of a serpent. Ling Han's body bent backward abruptly, dodging the swing of the curved blade. Such movements were practically impossible for an ordinary cultivator to execute. Only by cultivating the body could the body then display such swift reactions. Moreover, Ling Han looked even more like he had been chopped in half by a knife. The extent of the bend in the upper half of his body was so much that it was inconceivable. Jia Ming once again swung his fist over. This time, his arm actually transformed into a big serpent, with its head moving towards Ling Han while opening up its mouth to bite. The black-colored snake's head was quite lifelike, its poisonous fangs clearly visible. This strike was really too fast. It was so fast that Ling Han could not evade it in time. Pop! This punch immediately pierced through Ling Han. N. Jia Ming frowned, for he had not managed to hit Ling Han with this strike. Ling Han had transformed into a lightning bolt, and had, in a flash, fled 3 meters away. He transformed back into himself again and laughingly remarked, "Almost hit me. Not bad, this move is not bad. One move covering another, really does show some skill." He had already cultivated the thunderclap 9th heaven to the point of minor accomplishment, so his speed was of course rapid. How could it merely be some skill? It is more than enough to kill you. Jia Ming increased his battle prowess and charged towards Ling Han. He really was overbearing, this genius of Earth Dragon sect. Leaving his name on the Stone of Martial Intent, he himself was a whole cultivation tier higher than Ling Han, holding the upper hand whether it was in the aspect of physical strength or battle prowess. If not for Ling Han having a great recovery ability, in addition to the thunderclap 9th heaven allowing him to evade and dodge out of harm's way, he would have been hit badly and dealt severe injuries by his opponent for sure. Even so, Ling Han also became more and more passive. He could only return 1 to 2 moves for every 10 moves his opponent made. These words, I will engrave them on your tombstone to let everyone know that there was such an arrogant idiot who was too stubborn to admit defeat even at death's door. Jia Ming guffawed, the light reflecting off his curved blade. Chill ***. This was very fearsome, for it could pose an enormous threat to Ling Han's defense. After all, it was a high-level spirit tool, and with Jia Ming's more powerful physical strength, he could even rip through level 8 precious metal. Ling Han was no longer being passive and getting thrashed. He drew out the Revere Life Sword, then raised and brought it level, pointing at Jia Ming, and retaliated. Take a look at my sword that will slay you. Jia Ming looked at this sword, and his expression couldn't help but change as he unwittingly blurted out, Array patterns. It was obviously a sword, yet it was unexpectedly covered with array patterns. Strange, too strangite was way beyond his imagination. To be able to die by this sword, you can die with no regrets. Ling Han held the sword and struck out in a move to kill. Earlier, without the sword in hand, he could not fully display the might of Sword Ray, but now it was different. The Revere Life Sword itself contained some divine metal. Additionally, there was the fierce energy formed by the array patterns. Thus, the destructive power of Sword Ray delivered by this sword would naturally be even higher. Shua, Sword Ray swept out, seemingly able to destroy the heavens and wipe out the lands, extremely horrifying in its appearance. Hang, I am in the deity transformation tier, do you think I will fear you? Jia Ming humphed icily, swinging out his fist, transforming Ray into chi that formed huge black serpents that pounced towards Ling Han to bite him. Pop, pop, pop. The array patterns on the Revere Life Sword shone. There were merely 7 lights, but even so, it was still incredibly terrifying, mincing those big serpents into shreds. Jia Ming's expression turned ghastly pale. He knew that this sword was very impressive, but had not expected that it could reach such an extent. The destructive power could only be described as horrifying. How could there be such a precious tool? It was not as simple as Ling Han wielding an exceptionally outstanding tool had also activated an array that was a killing array with no compare, so how was one supposed to break it? Jia Ming cried out, eventually unleashing his ultimate great move. The empty shadow of the big serpent behind him disappeared, and became a genuine earth dragon. This kind of move made him terribly agonized. Bluish-green blood vessels were all over his face, and it looked like they were going to burst. After he howled loudly, the empty shadow of the earth dragon behind him finally stabilized, giving off a primal aura of an ancient era. At the beginning of the world, an earth dragon one came through the crack between the heaven and the earth. It was ancient and mysterious. The earth dragon held its head high. It did not have facial features, only a mouth, and its whole body was a dull red in color. Its limbs could be clearly seen as if it was still capable of dripping with sticky body fluids, giving one an incredible feeling of disgust. Die! As soon as Jia Ming pointed at Ling Han, that earth dragon immediately pounced over in Ling Han's direction. The speed was very fast. It was not a physical existence, and could not be judged with common sense. In an instant, it had appeared in front of Ling Han, and ferociously bit down. Yet, because it was not a realistic entity, it was naturally also impossible for it to cause any substantial injury. The whole body looked just like a shadow gliding across. Jia Ming actually bellowed out a hearty laugh as he shouted, "Ling Han, you are already a dead man." His complexion was slightly pallid. Nevertheless, he was wearing a carefree smile. This was actually his real trump card, which involved the power of his bloodline. Because his ancestral blood was not extremely thick, using such a great move was very straining on him, and there would even be a certain amount of backlash to face later. But that was all right, for although this earth dragon was an empty shadow and could not possibly do any harm to a realistic entity, the fact was it was specifically aimed to harm the soul. Ling Han's soul should have been swallowed. Even if not entirely gone, there would merely be traces left behind. How much actual strength would he still have left to fight with? He took off with a blood-curdling cry in Ling Han's direction, aiming to finish him off. This time, he wanted to thoroughly kill Ling Han. Under the burst of brute force, he was like a raging arrow charging forth, materializing in front of Ling Han in a flash. The curved blade in his hand slashed forth towards Ling Han's neck. The strength of his physique was cultivated with his cultivation technique, but he needed to consciously control his soft aspect. Was Ling Han still capable of that with the state he was in now? Die! A sneer hung at the corners of Jia Ming's lips. Finally, he could eliminate this great threat to himself. Chapter 727. Interference. Henyi! Henyi! A fist struck out. The array patterns on the curved blade shone, emitting a thick chill in the air. A ruthless smile appeared at the corners of Jia Ming's mouth, for with this one blow, this opponent who had the strongest battle prowess of all ages was going to be something of the past entirely. This gave him absolute joy. Zhu Xian and the others in her group cried out in alarm. What was wrong with Ling Han? Xiao, it was at this moment that Ling Han's figure suddenly bent and miraculously dodged this fatal blow. How was that possible? The smile on Jia Ming's face immediately froze, but without waiting for him to recover from his shock, a fearful coldness whirled across, slashing at his chest. He had not expected Ling Han to still be able to react at all. Moreover, He had just pulled off a great move a moment ago, so his condition had already fallen to an all-time low. It was basically impossible to evade this sword. Pooh! At once, the sword hit the middle of his chest squarely, and his whole body was sent flying by the slash as a fountain of blood spurted from his chest. How is it possible that your soul is still intact? Jia Ming covered his chest. This incomprehension was beyond the injuries he had suffered. He would die with regrets if he did not get a clear understanding of the situation. Ling Han smiled slightly and remarked, "Why should I tell you?" Previously, during the time when the Earth Dragon had sprung a surprise attack on him, he indeed had been affected. But with a slight tremor of the Black Tower, that discomfort had been dispersed. He simply remained unperturbed and laid out a trap for his opponent. Jia Ming was so indignant he wanted to kill something. That was his ultimate move. And it was precisely with this move that he could dash up to the 51st place on the Stone of Martial Intent. That it was actually ineffective on Ling Han. This was driving him nuts. Could it be that this was the difference between the first and the 51st place? Wah! He suddenly threw up blood. Firstly, it was because of the surging rage in his heart, while secondly, the injury he had sustained on his chest was really too severe. The killing aura has transformed into countless small swords, roving and shifting within his body, making him feel such agony that he wanted to die. There were even tears of blood flowing out from his eyes. He burned with hatred. Had it not been for his being overconfident in his own ultimate move, he absolutely would not have been so easily harmed by Ling Han. In terms of real strength, he was in no way weaker than Ling Han after all. He was also an ultimate genius, and furthermore, he had the advantage of being a whole cultivation tier higher. Now being totally defeated in the eye of the public, moreover defeated by one of an inferior cultivation level, how could he bear such humiliation? Ling Han shook his sword, and once again charged forth to kill. He wanted to thoroughly eliminate this man. Jia Ming hurriedly retreated as he did not want to die by Ling Han's hands. As long as his injuries recovered, there was still a chance for him to stage a comeback. He was definitely not weaker than Ling Han. But he had suffered a physical injury, and merely moving made his wound spurt out blood madly, which almost caused him to stumble and fall. His complexion also became ashen. Ling Han had arrived, unleashing a strike aimed at Jia Ming's neck, wanting to end this fight in a clear-cut and orderly manner. Jia Ming's hatred burst forth into flames of fury in his eyes. He had been so conceited that there was not any kind of life-saving precious treasure on him. On the one hand, he'd thought that there was none in this world that could or dared to kill him, and on the other, he believed that he would become dependent on such a treasure should it come into his possession, and would be held back from realizing his full potential. But now, he felt extreme regret. He didn't want to die. He wanted to live. Only if he stayed alive could he take revenge, and only by being alive could he surpass Ling Han. The sword slashed down. Pa! A withered and lean hand suddenly stretched out, 2 fingers pressed together firmly clamping the cutting blade of the sword in between, not letting the sword slash down even a tiny bit. An old man in a black-colored robe suddenly appeared. He was of great height and sturdy build, and as if he contained a volcano within his body, it looked like he could erupt at any time to burn the skies and wipe out the lands. He looked towards Ling Han and was all smiles as he said, "Young man, striking so ruthlessly, surely your heart must harbor sinister and vicious intentions." Ling Han lifted the blade of the sword. That old man also did not dare to go against such a killing sword forcefully. He withdrew his hand and retreated backward, while at the same time lifting Jia Ming up with a single move. "Respected Master Tong." Jia Ming revealed an expression of pleasant surprise. This was really an unexpected rescue from danger. Even for one with his disposition, he could not help but forget himself. This old man's surname was Tong, and the given name was Yang Wen. He was an elite of the Earth Dragon sect, and his cultivation level was in the heaven tier. Tong Yangwen smiled and actually said respectfully, Hereafter, you must always remember to put on the treasured talisman that the sect leader has bestowed upon you. Don't be presumptuous anymore. An act of carelessness could cause your downfall." "Yes." Jia Ming hastily nodded. His life was just saved by him, so no matter how wild Jia Ming was, he would also not dare to act arrogant at such a time. Tong Yangwen directed his line of vision towards Ling Han as his expression immediately became dark. To lash out without the least hesitation at a fellow disciple of the same academy, the moral character and disposition of yours really cause one's teeth to tremble. However, the Academy's core values are precisely to cure sickness and save lives. I shall then first cure you of your haughtiness, and let you have a little taste of what hardship is like. He struck out, and origin power gathered and transformed into a huge black hand, which was akin to have blotted out the sky and covered the earth, batting downwards over in Ling Han's direction. It was really sickening. Obviously wanted to settle a personal score, yet actually uttered such pretentious words. Ling Han's body transformed into a lightning bolt and retreated backward in the nick of time as he said with indifference, "Old fool, do you still want face? This was originally a duel, and since we have already agreed to fight, one should be responsible for one's life and death. Before this, during the time when I ran into danger, why did I not see you jump out and come running to my aid? Want to be asterisk 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 asterisk? Then don't think of setting up some kind of plaque to proclaim how chaste you are. It's so sickening." Tong Yongwen was so enraged that his body was trembling. This puny spiritual infant tier cultivator actually went so far to treat him with such insolence? He was at the peak of the heaven tier, and was only a step away from breaking through to the shattering void tier. No matter where he went, he should receive merely worship and reverence. But now, to actually be condemned by a torrent of verbal abuse in his face. This made him so overwhelmed with ire and wrath that he was almost driven mad. "Lad, you actually dare hurl insults at me?" he reprimanded, his eyes burning with killing intent. He did not kill Ling Han, because he treasured ability. As a slave, Ling Han was not too bad, and he could someday deliver him to the immortal realm. Then, after being brainwashed, he would be turned into a qualified lackey. Yet, Ling Han actually dared to curse him so mercilessly, so his killing intent was naturally incited. He was but a slave, so what if he died? So be it. It did not matter how excellent natural talent was. He could just use 10 other lackeys to compensate for the gap left behind. All right? Ling Han smiled faintly and responded, "Dirty old swine, why could you not be cursed at? I am a heaven-grade alchemist, and my position is of the same rank as yours, so you tell me why I could not curse you?" Tong Yongwen gave a scornful laugh. If it were a few hundred years ago, then indeed he would not want to offend a heaven-grade alchemist, for that would jeopardize the relationship with the Alchemist Association and affect the martial arts of the whole realm. But now, concoction of the realm pill was near at hand, and now that there was no use left for them, what was the use of an alchemist? At most, they needed only bring a few gifted talents of above-average standard into the immortal realm, then train and develop them. Nevertheless, they would still become lackeys. Just a lowly servant, what right did he have to behave so arrogantly? "Then you are really courting your own demise." Tong Yongwen's killing aura was ablaze. Injuring fellow disciples and cursing at your seniors, such dishonorable conduct has to be punished. I, on behalf of the Restore Heaven Academy, shall mete out the punishment. To pull the weight of your seniority, there is no lack of words to do so. Old dog, you have let me behold shamelessness at an all-new high. I am deeply impressed. Ling Han mocked with a short laugh. "Damn you!" Tong Yongwen eventually could not hold it in anymore, and once again a palm struck forth. This time, his killing intent had been stirred, and the big hand that he swung out in a patting movement was much more fearsome than before. One by one, the patterns lit up, and the imposing aura of the heaven tier pressed down heavily. Just the air alone was enough to send an ordinary spiritual infant tier cultivator collapsing into pieces. Ling Han's figure hastily dodged and arrived by Zhu Xian'er's side, where he then stretched out his arms and lifted her into his arms as he simultaneously called out, "Hunyo rabbit, let's go!" Fighting head-on against a heaven-tier elite? Only an idiot would do such a thing. Chapter 728. Break Free. Henyi. Henyi. Ling Han grabbed hold of Zhu Xian'er, not bothering with the others. Although Yuan Changhe and Li Fengyu were his underlings, both were also disciples of the Restore Heaven Academy. Tong Yongwen would not be frenzied to the point of doing something stupid like laying his hands on them. As for Hunyo and Rabbit, their speed was not inferior to his, so there was no need for him to carry them along. Most importantly, the lesser the burden, the faster Ling Han's speed would also be. After he developed a body of lightning, it really did manage to elevate his speed to unimaginable heights, but it could only be considered barely comparable with the heaven tiers. Thus, if he wanted to bring along more people and yet still be capable of fleeing from a heaven-tier elite, that would really be crazy. "Want to flee?" Tong Yongwen sneered, stepping forth in one big stride, maneuvering that colossal palm in a swift attempt to grab them. He was fast, but Ling Han was not slow, either. With the activation of the demon fairy steps, his figure was akin to that of a ghost. At the same time, he brandished his sword in a backward slash. Sword ray appeared in a blaze, and with the addition of the might of the Revere Life Sword, this strike was a blatant display of his abilities. Even Tong Yongwen dared not let the strike hit him, so he had no choice but to give his right hand a shake to set off a stream of energy to dissolve the threat that this strike presented to him. Ling Han seized the opportunity to flee far into the distance, with Zhu Xian'er naturally hanging upon his back, without the need for Ling Han to expend energy to hold on to her. He drew forth the setting sun bow, gathered his origin power into an arrow, and xiao, multiple ******* 1. Although he did not draw an actual arrow, the layering of the three mystical powers together was still absolutely astonishing. Tong Yongwen had no other choice but to repeatedly wave both hands to swat aside the arrows of origin power which caught him by surprise, making him bellow loudly in fury. Damn it. His skill completely suppressed Ling Han, yet he was actually being inflicted with a series of clever maneuvers deployed by the other, and could only gaze on helplessly at the other's receding figure. In the end, he was completely livid, all the blood in his body boiling, to the point he was no longer concerned with Ling Han's attack. He transformed into the likes of a raging arrow and pursued after Ling Han. Xiao, the arrow of origin power hit his body, yet could only pierce through his clothing and reveal the bulging muscles. It seemed as if his body was forged from precious metal. In the Earth Dragon sect, everyone cultivated body arts. Tong Yongwen's natural talent definitely was not as good as Jia Ming's, yet to be able to advance to the heaven tier, he also could not possibly be any ordinary person, either. Furthermore, the higher his cultivation level, the higher naturally would be the cultivation level of his body arts, using his higher cultivation level to compensate for the gap in quality. He went against the exterminating dragon star arrow, and charged in Ling Han's direction. Heaven tier was really so troublesome. Ling Han sighed. For a spiritual infant tier cultivator to be able to manage this much, it was already considered a miracle. He had no choice but to put forth a real arrow, and after drawing out his full strength, shot it in the direction of his opponent. The destructive power of this strike was too strong. Even Tong Yongwen dared not counter it head-on, and could only wave forth his palm in a strike to bat away the arrow. Yet it was precisely because of this short span of time that Ling Han once again took the advantage to flee far away, greatly widening the distance between them. Shameless old wretch, wait till I advance to the deity transformation tier, I will definitely chop off your dog's head. With these words, Ling Han turned around and hastily fled away with his full speed. Hu Niu also made a face at him and said, "Old wretch, next time Niu will come again to beat you." Rabbit wore an expression of innocent sight obviously did not do anything, so why did it have to follow in their wake and escape as well? Why do I have to flee together with the lot of you? I feel so wronged. It spoke out in thorough discontentment. You have pilfered so many spiritual herbs that being wronged once or twice in a while is also considered nothing short of appropriate and fair. Ling Han roared with hearty laughter, yet even stronger wind was being tossed out under his steps as he ran even faster. Tong Yongwen again gave chase, but because he had fallen behind too much, after pursuing for a few steps, he had already lost track of Ling Han and could only come to a stop, feeling vexed. After running for quite a long time, Ling Han slowed down his pace. From the map, they were already fast approaching the herb garden. Rabbit, the herb garden is but up ahead, so how about it, don't you feel tempted? Ling Han laughingly said. Rabbit swallowed its saliva, but still spoke out obstinately. Do you think that I have not seen the world and will lose control of myself over just a few carrots? Gold-seeking rat also crawled out from Ling Han's front, with its big eyes full of anticipation. Spiritual herbs and what not, they were its favorite. Niu also wants. Hu Niu also joined in on the fun. Ling Han was in a cold sweat. There were 4 people at his side, and 3 were actually gluttons. They took another step forward and the barren desert finally disappeared as lush and verdant forest and grassland emerged ahead. They also caught sight of a dilapidated courtyard wall. Evidently, this place had been subjected to grave damage. Is this still a herb garden? Ling Han muttered. Although spiritual herbs were nurtured by nature, nourished to the extreme, the requirements with regards to their growth conditions were also very stringent. As such, This herb garden had been divided into countless regions, and every region had its own specific array, altering the environment to suit the growth of every kind of spiritual herbs. But the damage this place had suffered was too severe. Most of the arrays had been destroyed, which naturally brought a fatal disaster to the spiritual herbs that were originally growing here. As far as the eye could see, there were only ordinary trees and plants remaining here. Perhaps there might still be some spiritual herbs here, but to seek them out was absolutely not a matter that could be done in a short while. "Rabbit, now is the time for you to shine," Ling Han said. "Pay, I am not a dog to have such good sense of smell," Rabbit instantly retorted. "Quickly look for it," Hunyo fiercely ordered while staring fixedly at Rabbit, and continued in a harsh tone, "Else I will eat you." Rabbit feared no one, but became alarmed at Hunyo's words, and proceeded to sniff in earnest at once, leading the group in search of spiritual herbs. However, this place was too wide, and even if Rabbit really had a nose like a dog, it also would not be able to sniff out and locate the spiritual herbs right away. They ceaselessly wandered and loitered all over the surrounding areas, while Rabbit also continuously shook its head, saying that it could not trace the scent of spiritual herbs anywhere. 3 days passed, yet they were still unfruitful, so they decided to depart and proceed towards the Langya Library first. After changing their course, they journeyed on. Less than half a day later, they came across a multitude of imperial palaces, which ought to have been incomparably magnificent, yet were now actually almost completely damaged. In addition, no matter how far the distance, one could also make out that there were signs of them being haunted by demonic beasts. They advanced in the direction of the imperial capital, moving with extreme caution. The demonic beasts that roamed around this place were not to be taken lightly. Furthermore, there were other powerful cultivators also scouting this place. They absolutely could not afford to be careless. Those in search of treasures at such a historical site would not bother with any courtesy whatsoever. Given the opportunity, they would attempt to kill the others in an attempt to obtain treasures themselves. Without doubt, the most important would still be to avoid the demonic beasts. There were a few auras that were extraordinarily powerful and had reached the level of the heaven tier. They were creatures that Ling Han was currently incapable of fighting against. "The library is in that direction." Ling Han possessed the map given by the Lunar King. After considering the direction, he took the lead and set out. The area was huge where the multitude of imperial palaces were at, yet no matter how big, it was also only to a certain extent. Very quickly, 3 people, a rabbit, and a rat came upon the front of a pavilion which had remained in good condition. The pavilion had only 3 floors, and was also not very big. In fact, it was looking especially small in such a place with so many imperial palaces, but this was actually the only structure that had not suffered any damage. Not even a shred, causing one to wonder. It was precisely because of such peculiarity that this place attracted many, and they practically filled this place to the brim. Ling Han looked at the pavilion, directing his gaze upwards. There, a plaque was hung, with the words Langya Library written on it. Chapter 729. Langya Library. Henyi. Were we too late? Ling Han's gaze swept across the place. There were at least over 100 people here. Furthermore, those were only the ones standing outside the pavilion who knew how many more were inside. Ling Han pulled a person away and asked, "Old chap, may I ask what is going on here?" Luck seemed to be on his side as he happened upon someone who liked to brag about his knowledge, and proceeded to explain to him right away in an endless torrent. This was a library, a place where a great deal of secret techniques was stored. There were martial art techniques as well as cultivation techniques. Each and every of the secret techniques was wrapped up within a light sphere that remained afloat in midair as it fluttered about. If one wished to acquire them, one would have to strike out and intercept them. Then, once they managed to seize it, they had to shake it to break the light sphere, and the secret technique that lay within would be theirs. Everyone could only enter once and stay for a day at most. After gaining a secret technique, regardless of whether the time was up or not, one would be delivered out. Ling Han was surprised as he said, "Isn't there an elite of the Shattering Void tier here? Why not just directly collect this entire library? Isn't that much simpler? How nice it would be if he could obtain the whole library in a single go. In that way, whatever techniques there were would all belong to him." That person gave an exuberant laugh and remarked, "Youngsters, thankfully it is me that you asked, otherwise, others definitely would not know it." He then lowered his voice while adding on in a feigned mysterious manner. Just so you know, this pavilion itself is precisely an array. Yet in the event that the array is met with an attack, it will then destroy all the secret techniques that lie within. Understanding dawned on Ling Han in a flash. Try to forcefully obtain the library, and one would only end up not being able to obtain anything at all. Then, naturally, one could only play the game according to the rules. It was not that the elite of Shattering Void tier could not deal with this array, but rather that this array used the secret techniques as hostages, leaving the Shattering Void tier elite with no way around it as well. Thank you. He nodded towards that person, and then turned to Zhu Xian'er and the others. We shall go and try our luck too. They squeezed through the throngs of people and entered the library. As soon as they set foot in the library, their expressions vividly revealed the astonishment they were feeling. This place was seemingly like a vast starry sky amid a pitch-black environment. There was a scatter of light specks dancing and swinging about, just like a sky full of meteors. Scrutinizing upon it carefully, it was precisely as that man from before had said. The secret techniques were wrapped up within light spheres, hovering in the skies all around. Of course, this was not a starry sky. At first glance the space was huge, but in fact, it was only a square 1 acre big, and its height was approximately 150 meters. For a cultivator, this sort of size and height was nothing short of just a leap. They could land wherever they wished. However, just as Ling Han was thinking to rise high into the air, he detected that there was a force forcing him down right away. He moved his body in a bounce, but his speed was in fact heavily hampered by the strong suppression. Air. This greatly heightened the degree of difficulty in seizing the light sphere. Everyone had to abide by the rules here. One could choose not to comply or try to resist, but according to the impressive strength of the array here, probably even Heaven tier elites could only behave honestly. Shattering Void tier elites perhaps could break down such bonds, but the consequence would be the loss of all the secret techniques here. Ling Han didn't know who'd actually designed this library, but it was really quite a trick. The probability of that person being Fatima was pretty high. After all, he had an extraordinarily great inclination and knack for mischief. Here, everyone could only advance at the pace of a normal person, and the height of one's leap was also not high. Hence, as far as the light spheres that filled the sky were concerned, it appeared that there was practically no feasible way. However, amidst the random motions of the light spheres as they danced about in the air, there were also rare occasions when they touched the ground, and they could still be captured. This would then depend on luck because this place was actually quite expansive. If one did not keep a watchful eye in advance, when the light spheres flitted down, one would also not be in time to catch it. Ling Han swept in the direction of the light spheres in the air. Because the extent of the motions was too rapid, while their frequency was too close, he had a hard time getting a good look at the things within the light spheres, catching only a few words occasionally. For instance, Sunflower Demon, Cultivation Execution, and other such incomplete names, believed to be the names of these secret techniques. He called up the Eye of Truth, and used it to diligently capture the information that was displayed within these light spheres. Found it! After almost an hour later, Ling Han finally locked onto one of the light spheres. The name that manifested within it was Earth Overturning Seal. Even if he possessed the Eye of Truth, it was also so difficult. He reckoned that others totally could not even make clear the situation. They struck out to grab as soon as they saw a light sphere flitting over. As for whether they managed to successfully grab their target or not, that was a different matter. This light sphere was now fluttering swiftly aloft. Ling Han tried to use the blood-sucking origin gold, but that thing's speed was too fast, and he simply could not catch up with it. No, there had to be a solution. Ling Han looked closely, no longer impulsively striking out for fear that he would accidentally latch onto other light spheres, after which he'd be sent out of the library. Ya Niao caught one. Hu Niao delightedly cried out. Her luck was exceptionally good. One of the light spheres actually walked into the trap and floated down towards her body. That little girl naturally would not hold back and took that light sphere. The little girl was also immediately delivered out of the library. Ling Han withdrew his gaze and continued to fix his eyes on that light sphere with the Earth Overturning Seal wrapped within it. After observing it for less than half a day, he finally discovered that, in fact, there was a sequence to the revolving motions of the light spheres. It was just that the variations were incomparably complicated, so calculating them naturally would be beset with difficulties. The next drop point would be there. Ling Han immediately moved his body and ran in the direction of the place in accordance to his calculations. But he only made it halfway there when someone actually emerged ahead and blocked his path. "Make way!" As Ling Han spoke out these words, slightly half of his body was winding around from the side of the other's body. After all, they did not know each other, and if he were to rashly charge forward, it was highly likely that he would be dealt a severe blow by the other. Shwa! His figure passed through, and ahead of him a light sphere was in the midst of descending swiftly, no more than 3 meters away from him. This normally would just be in a split-second speed, yet now, Ling Han needed to run towards it in 3 steps. "Humph, how dare you!" That person was actually furious, and instantly drew out his saber and delivered a slash in Ling Han's direction. Xiao! The saber ray transformed into a drill that struck forth swiftly. He was merely passing him. Moreover, he had already spoken out in advance, and did not even touch him, and yet he wanted to kill. Ling Han did not move to parry the blow, for it'd be a waste of time, and directly used his body to forcefully take this blow. He even did not have the energy to revolve the particles within his body to try to avoid injuries at all cost. The saber ray slashed onto his body, releasing an aftershock that trembled through his body in its wake. Bloodstains could be seen tainting his back. Thankfully, it was only a minor wound, and the body of Diamond had automatically healed the wound. He stretched out his hand in the direction of the swiftly descending light sphere, but the light sphere grazed through his fingers, rebounded from the ground, and returned back to the sky once again. Fuck! Ling Han was swearing in his heart. It was clearly because he was slashed by the other that he missed, short by a mere hair's breadth difference at that. Damn him! Hee hee, youngster, this is a lesson for you, next time don't be so impulsive. The person who delivered that slash spoke from behind Ling Han, his words filled with delight at Ling Han's predicament. Earlier, he slashed for he, firstly, indeed felt annoyed, and secondly, when he chanced upon the light sphere descending towards the direction that Ling Han was precisely rushing to, he was immediately filled with envy. If I could not get it, why should I let you get it? Such a trifling spiritual infant tier junior, he naturally had nothing to fear from him given he was at the peak of the deity transformation tier and his battle prowess had exceeded 9 battle stars. How could it be that this little junior still dared to retaliate against him in a bid to even the score? Ling Han did really feel like killing someone, but when his gaze swept across the light spheres in the sky, he actually forcibly held back the urge. He had to start afresh to seek it out, then lock onto that light sphere and calculate when would be the next time it was going to descend and where was the location it would land at. There was only a day's time, and according to the sequence from before, it appeared he only had one last chance left. Chapter 730. Capture successful. Henyi. That deity transformation tier cultivator saw Ling Han, and could not restrain the smirk appearing at the corners of his mouth. This, in his view, was a thing to be expected as a matter of course, merely a spiritual infant tier cultivator would also dare to challenge him. Hang, I reckon you are sensible. Beside that deity transformation tier, there was another junior, and he stared at Ling Han with disdain, yet in fact, there was profound envy hidden in the depths of his eyes. Certainly, both of them were of nearly the same age strictly speaking. He was even older by 5 to 6 years. Yet he had just broken through to the flower blossom tier, while Ling Han was already in the spiritual infant tier, which made it a difference of a whole cultivation tier. Upon calculating, how much older was he than Ling Han? At least 10 years. He was only over 20 years old, having cultivated for no more than over 10 years, yet their difference was 10 years. What kind of notion was this? There was such an enormous gap in both their talents. Ling Han swept a glance over, and mentally took note of these two's appearance. Fuck, I did not display my prowess, and you all really think that I'm a weakling. Stop staring, stare some more and I will dig out your eyeballs. That junior glared, his face looking absolutely ferocious. He was called Zhou Yucheng. This time, he came out together with his third elder, Zhou de Yuan. He was young and the one with the best talent in 3 generations of the Zhou clan was only 24 years old, and had already broken through to the flower blossom tier. It was extremely likely that he would achieve the deity transformation tier in the future. The Zhou clan was a clan on the level of the deity transformation tier, with 4 clansmen on such level. This kind of existence, with third elder Zhou de Yuan as the strongest, had achieved the pinnacle of the deity transformation tier. In the Zhou clan, Zhou Yuchang was fully deserving of the title #1 genius, and was also similarly considered to be one of the existences to be reckoned with within the surrounding radius of 1,000 miles. The geniuses that could stand beside him on an equal footing were few in number. But if placed in the middle state, he could only be termed as a genius. There was still a huge difference between him and first-class geniuses and super geniuses, for instance, him not being able to get into the Restore Heaven Academy directly. Thus, after not being able to pass the admission test of the Restore Heaven Academy, he became excessively hateful of those who were more of a genius than him, wanting to exterminate any that he encountered, possessing a kind of morbid obsession. Ling Han retracted his gaze and his attention returned to that light sphere once again. Earth Overturning Seal. A mystical power. In comparison, the incessant chatter of this kind of nobodies was nothing but superficial. In future, simply dealing him a killing slap to finish him off would do. Whereas, if because of such a trivial thing he let slip a mystical power, then that would be a massive loss and a loss he could ill afford. Zhou Yuchang could not help but feel pleased with himself. So what if you are a genius? Can you win against someone in the deity transformation tier? Zhou De Yuan also did not pay further attention to Ling Han, for his focus now was naturally on capturing a light sphere. If he could just obtain a first-class cultivation technique, perhaps he could then make that crucial step to break through into becoming a heaven-tier existence. That would be really awesome. Zhu Xian Air and Rabbit's efforts were also fruitful. After managing to get a light sphere each, they were both delivered outside. The duration that allowed 1 day and 1 night was almost up, and the light sphere that Ling Han had been staring fixedly at all this while descended from the sky once more. Ling Han had long since rushed forth, stretching out his hand to quickly grab it. But at this time, another hand stretched out, similarly grabbing towards the light sphere. That person was really lucky. Naturally, it was not that he had calculated the descending path of the light sphere, but rather was originally standing there, and by coincidence, the light sphere crashed in his direction, making it seem like the light sphere was voluntarily throwing itself into his arms of its own accord. And that person also did not hold back, stretched out his hand to swiftly grasp it, and touched upon the light sphere at practically the same time as Ling Han. It was Shen Yuan Ziguang. Ling Han was somewhat faintly surprised. He already knew beforehand that this person, classified as the super lucky person, the kind that not only did not perish after falling down a cliff, but also obtained ancient treasures of predecessors won. Currently, this so-called lucky attribute was also put in action as the Earth Overturning Seal willingly hurled itself into his bosom, making Ling Han feel totally envious. Some people are really born with a lucky life. But Ling Han was actually even more confident, because what he depended on was actual strength. Actual strength would always be there. Moreover, it'd only continuously elevate. As for luck, there would inevitably come a time when it was used up, or a time when it was ineffective. Furthermore, having too much good luck, progressing too smoothly all the time, was not at all benefiting one's advance on the path of martial arts. Ling Han. Shenyuan Ziguang also caught sight of Ling Han, and could not restrain the reflexive roar that escaped his mouth. He especially detested Ling Han. Not only had Ling Han defeated him again and again, which was a heavy blow to his confidence, but Ling Han had also snatched away the apple of his eye. And yet now, he still wanted to fight with him over a secret technique. A divine light was seen surging throughout his body, which made him appear like a deity descending from the heavens above, mighty beyond words. That was the armored attire he was wearing on his body now. There were several hundred patterns, every single one shining, setting off over 1,000 rays of light, swiftly slashing towards Ling Han. It was a spirit tool that was possibly at level 8. Shenyuan Ziguang's luck was really so strong that it could even defy the will of the gods. He absolutely did not have this treasured tool before. He merely ventured out and picked up a spirit tool, Bell of Heaven and Earth's Fate. Ling Han was fearless. His body emitted light just like a treasured tool. You're depending on the spirit tool to become strong, however. I, on the other hand, am personally this strong on my own. Who is more awesome? Shwa, shwa, shwa. The rays from the treasured tool continuously slashed onto Ling Han's body, slicing open his clothing and slashing his body. Every single part of his skin and muscle was moving as if they had a will of their own. The attacks from the spirit tool were all rendered unsuccessful. Pang! Ling Han threw out a punch, and how could Shenyuan Ziguang block it? He instinctively jumped backward as he retreated 7 steps consecutively. Hi's face was bright red and became pale after that as he gasped for air, losing his breath and almost lost consciousness on the spot. His expression was unsightly. He was no match for Ling Han before, and he was still no match for Ling Han now. Even with the aid of a spirit tool, it was still no good. Why was the disparity between them getting more and more prominent? He was one who had the luck of heaven and earth on his side. Ling Han smiled subtly. He had finally captured that light sphere. The light sphere was smashed to pieces, and the writings on it instantly vanished, while it also became dull. Within it was a green-colored bead. The passing on of mystical powers was all non-verbal. Earth overturning seal, mystical power technique. Shenyuan Zi Guang bellowed, and pointed at Ling Han with his right hand. Return the mystical power to me. All of a sudden, nearly all gazes, about 2/3 of them simultaneously rested upon Ling Han, and none of them was not filled with greed. Mystical power. Though no one had ever evaluated the grades of the mystical powers, legend had it that a mystical power was even more awesome than a heaven-grade cultivation technique, deemed to be the secret technique cultivated by the deities and lost within the mortal world. Who would not be envious? Ling Han's figure flashed, and he had already left the library, had obtained a secret technique and was delivered outside. Ling Han. Hu Niu and the rest all greeted him. Ling Han nodded and said, "Get ready to flee." "Going on the run again?" Hu Niu said with a face full of smiles, and clapped her small hands. "It's such fun, let's see who can run the fastest." "Hee hee. Where do you think you're fleeing to?" A group of people chased out of the library. They were not transported out of the library, rather, they came out on their own, and as such they were naturally slightly slower. Zhou de Yuan gazed at Ling Han and remarked with indifference, "Hand over the mystical power and I shall let you live." Ling Han could not hold back the murderous aura in him from spilling forth. Earlier, it was because of prioritizing the earth-overturning seal that he did not deign to seek to get even with the other, yet, unexpectedly, here he was actually turning up of his own volition. Ling Han replied nonchalantly, "Oh? And why should I?" Zhou de Yuan's conceit was obvious. It was apparent that he was very full of himself as he clasped both hands behind his back in a relaxed manner, and drawled, "Your intellect is really worrisome. It is impossible for you to retain this mystical power no matter what. The only choice you have is whether or not you want to lose your life as well." Chapter 731. Slaying Zhou. Henyi. There's no point in talking rubbish with him. Get rid of him and the mystical power will be ours. Zhou Yucheng yelled from the side. True. Zhou de Yuan nodded and headed in Ling Han's direction in big strides, the aura of the deity transformation tier unleashed. This was a show of his formidable might, made to terrorize Ling Han, and also to intimidate the others as well. The meaning was clear. This young man was his, so the lot of them should bear that in mind and weigh their decision carefully before laying a hand on him. Ling Han looked upon these two members of the Zhou clan, and could not help but feel his killing intent boiling over. Previously, because of Zhou de Yuan's strike, he'd missed the earth-overturning seal, and were it not for the fact that there was another chance. So what if he chopped Zhou de Yuan to pieces? Earlier he was too occupied to bother getting even with them, but now they themselves sought him out, so was there a need for Ling Han to hold back? He smiled drily as he taunted, "There's a certain saying, the bird which takes the lead gets shot first." None of the others made any move, and only the two of you foolish birds jumped out. If this is not courting your own demise, then I don't know what it is. What impudence! Do you think that you can still act with such haughty air and high-handedness in front of Third Elder? Zhou Yucheng said with his finger pointing at Ling Han. If not for his level being inferior to Ling Han's, he really wanted to charge at him and tear him apart. Zhou de Yuan's gaze was also dark as he stretched out his right hand, drawing forth a pattern interwoven into the form of a dazzling light. He then gave a frosty snort and made a grab in Ling Han's direction as his origin power gathered and transformed into an even bigger palm, swatting down from above straight at Ling Han. Extremely swift and fierce, it was unleashed with the ultimate objective of taking Ling Han's life. Ling Han stood still and motionless, and waited for when the big hand came downward. Only then did he strike out, his sword ray slashing forth. Pooh! The big palm had then been divided into two, and its dazzling light completely vanished. Ah! Zhou de Yuan involuntarily let out a groan. using his left hand to support his right hand. A terrible gash could be seen in the center of his right hand's palm, where fresh blood was now flowing out. Pa pa pa, the blood dripped onto the ground, shaking the earth. The blood of a deity transformation tier cultivator was absolutely an invaluable tonic. For an alchemist who had no scruples, it could even be collected to be used as an alchemical ingredient. Zhou de Yuan hastily used his origin power to seal off the flowing blood and stop the blood loss. However, he was astonished to discover that there was a terrifying sword intent circulating within the wound. His origin power was being shattered to bits by it as the latter surged forth, in the end leaving pretty much none to seal the wound. Blood remained streaming. How could this be possible? This guy's battle prowess was so strong that only one strike already injured him so heavily. Zhou de Yuan could not believe it. As he saw it, Ling Han was merely a junior in the spiritual infant tier. Even earlier when Zhou de Yuan had struck him, Ling Han also did not retaliate and just meekly yielded, daring not even to express any anger. If he was really this strong, then just why endure and put up with it earlier? Third Elder. Zhou Yucheng was somewhat shaken. In his heart, he had always believed that the 4 elders of his clan were existences that ought to be able to sweep away any opposition in this world. Yet how was it possible that one of them would lose out facing a young fellow? Where Zhou de Yuan's air of arrogance stemmed from was also where his confidence lay. Now that his 3rd elder was actually injured by the opposing party's strike, Zhou Yucheng immediately wanted to retreat, fearing the what-if. Old wretch, since you insist on courting death, then I can only fulfill your wish. Ling Han did not draw the Revere Life Sword or the Demon Birth Sword. Just now, he had merely brandished his 2 fingers, but he used the Thunderclap 9th Heaven, and it was precisely this mystical power that wreaked havoc within the opposing party's wound, not letting it easily heal. I want to kill you! Zhou de Yuan roared as he summoned forth his saber, brandishing it in a strike in Ling Han's direction. Xiao, a light over 300 meters long flashed out of the saber, transforming into a raging dragon. Ling Han also drew out his sword. After all, the opponent was in existence at the peak of the deity transformation tier. His strike from before could be said to have leveraged the other's negligence, but he indeed should not underestimate his opponent. The sword he drew out was the Demon Birth Sword. It should suffice to tackle the likes of Zhou de Yuan. If the Demon Birth Sword still had its tool spirit, it definitely would feel absolutely aggrieved, thinking, I am also an impressive 10th tier spirit tool, but have now actually been reduced to slaying a deity transformation tier. Shua, sword ray struck out, merely about 10 meters in length. The power of ray was decided by its length and its thickness. The longer and the thicker, the more frightful would be the destructive power of the ray. Therefore, upon seeing that the ray that Ling Han struck out was merely 10 meters long only, Zhou de Yuan's heart immediately felt calm, while Zhou Yucheng on the other hand also recovered his confidence. He had actually doubted his own elder. He had really thought too highly of that brat. Pooh! The sword ray and the saber ray clashed, colliding against each other. Pooh! The saber ray was actually broken into half. Both broken halves of the saber ray still swept over in accordance with its original course, and actually streaked past on both sides of Ling Han's body. He needed not give way, not even slightly. However, the sword ray was akin to an ultimate divine weapon as it continued sweeping over at Zhou de Yuan. Zhou de Yuan was terror-stricken and hurriedly leaped into the air to evade, his face filled with fright and panic. How could it be possible that his saber ray was actually so far off from Ling Han's sword ray in terms of quality? In a head-on collision, it was crushed by the opponent's sword ray. It was truly like a broken wooden sword running into a genuine sword, being promptly destroyed once touched. He could not help but shudder somewhat. Indeed, the thicker and longer the sword ray, the better, as the destructive power was even more powerful. However, similar to the sword chi, the sword ray's power also depended on 2 other factors: the cultivator's comprehension and the level of the weapon that the cultivator used. That sword. Zhou de Yuan absolutely did not believe that Ling Han's understanding of the sword far exceeded his mastery of the saber. In that case, there was only one explanation. The level of the spirit tool within the opponent's hand was too high, resulting in the sword ray being also extremely swift and fierce, not only making up for the gap of an entire cultivation tier in terms of quality, but still turning around to oppress him. Haha, this is also going to be mine. In his heart, he has already concluded that Ling Han was actually depending on the strength of his spirit tool and not on strength being exceptional, even if spirit tool was also part of the actual strength. He once again charged forth. He had to move with a dazzling speed to make Ling Han wield his sword in vain. He would then strike again to kill Ling Han and seize that treasured sword and the mystical power. Ling Han stood motionless, appearing as if he was unable to catch sight of Zhou De Yuan's figure at all. Zhou De Yuan couldn't help feeling jubilant. His figure, rapidly flashing past, had already appeared behind Ling Han and abruptly struck out in a chopping arc, slashing in the direction of Ling Han's neck. Just die, just die. His saber struck. Zhou De Yuan was first delighted, but then felt greatly alarmed as Ling Han's figure had somehow disappeared before him. In his heart, a strong sense of uneasiness welled up immediately, and sure enough, a voice spoke out behind him. What is it? Are you perhaps looking for me? He was so shocked that his *** tightened. The cold sweat all over his body instantly fell akin to a waterfall as he hastily turned around, wielded his saber and struck out. The saber ray's extensive moves were piercingly cold as well as densely chilling. But the strike hit empty space again. Could it be? Just when Zhou De Yuan felt his heart was engulfed in a shocking breakdown, a voice again drifted over from behind. I don't want to play with you anymore. No. Zhou De Yuan was just about to shout out, but, pooh. He only felt a coolness over his chest and back, and then noticed the sharp point of a sword protruding from his chest. It had already pierced his heart. He was both furious and shocked, actually being made to play a game of cat and mouse, yet the corners of his lips actually revealed a sneer. He felt Ling Han underestimated a deity transformation tier cultivator too much, achieving the kind of high level he was at. How was it possible that he could die so easily? His life and vitality were too powerful. So what if his heart had ruptured? He could condense his origin power while taking life-saving treasured elixirs and he still could live on. However, your one strike pierced through my body. If I wield another strike, how would you be able to dodge any longer? Zhou De Yuan wanted to turn around and strike out, but immediately realized that his origin power was like the floodwater from an opened floodgate. He was unable to condense it in any way as it flowed endlessly. He didn't even have the strength to hold his weapon as the treasured saber fell, the sharp point of the saber slicing downward and in the end slashing off half of his right foot. A deity transformation tier cultivator without the protection of his origin power. How different was he from a body refining tier 1? Chapter 732. Shamelessness that knows no bounds. Henyi. Zhou De Yuan barely managed to turn his body around, and looked blankly at Ling Han as he uttered, How did? He remained unable to comprehend the reason for his demise. Just what had brought about his fatal downfall. After all, it was only his heart that had been punctured. This was naturally because the demon birth sword was a level 10 spirit tool, although Ling Han was unable to bring out its true impressive ability into full play, being solidly pierced through by it with one strike. The body had immediately been taken over by the sword, intent wreaking utter destruction, and it would not be too far-fetched to say that even heaven-tier elites would not be able to withstand it. Otherwise, it would be rather too shoddy for a level 10 spirit tool. Ling Han had no intention to respond to a dead man, much less a shameless one at that. Was there a need to satisfy the other's curiosity? He pulled out the sword and leveled his gaze at Zhou Yucheng. No! Zhou Yucheng hastily made a run for it. Pooh! He only managed to take 3 steps, whereupon he felt a jolt in his body as pain exploded in his chest. Only then did he realize that a sharp arrow created by origin power had already punctured his body. He stretched out his hand, seemingly like he wanted to grasp onto something, but fell down with a loud crash nevertheless, completely lifeless. Pa, someone applauded. They only saw that an old man in a grey cloak came forth as he clapped his hands, and he was full of praises. I would expect no less of a genius from the Restore Heaven Academy, exceeding the gap of an entire cultivation tier and destroying the enemy. Who are you? Ling Han asked with indifference. Is this any way to greet a senior? Where are your manners? The grey-cloaked old man admonished with apparent slight displeasure. I am from the Azure Thunder sect, and also a teacher in the Restore Heaven Academy. Now that you have met me, quickly give me your greetings and use proper address. Ling Han gave a short laugh, and responded, Talking about proper etiquette with me? Fine, I will have a talk about proper etiquette with you. I am a heaven-grade alchemist, considered to be on par with heaven tier, and you are but a puny deity transformation tier warrior. Now that you have met me, quickly give me your greetings and use proper address. Indeed, a heaven-grade alchemist was considered to be on par with heaven tier. Actually, as the heaven tier elite still needed the former to concoct pills for their use, such an alchemist's status was even higher than theirs, and even the shattering void tier also needed to give him face somewhat. Furthermore, he was still only a heaven-grade low-level alchemist if one had already become heaven-grade medium-level alchemist, in other words, a saint-grade alchemist, then even shattering void tier elites also had to receive them as a distinguished guest. What a pity that, at present, there was only the Ling Han from 10,000 years ago who had achieved such a high level. Although later generations had produced heaven-grade alchemists, all were only heaven-grade low-level, and not qualified to have shattering void tier elites bow to them. But even if he was a heaven-grade low-level alchemist, it was more than enough to be used as a scare tactic for deity transformation tier cultivators. Mao Jun could not help but be struck speechless. This was indeed a problem. After taking a look at Ling Han because of his age, he subconsciously overlooked the high level he had achieved on the path of alchemy. Among anyone who wanted to become a heaven-grade alchemist, which one was not a 300 or even 400-year-old ancient monster? Even when the past Ling Han broke through to the level of saint-grade alchemist, that was also when he was nearing 200 years of age. Then I even can say I am a saint-grade alchemist. Why don't you come over and pay your respects? Right, you expect us to just foolishly take your word for it just because you said so? You are just an insignificant brat. Mao Jun also had a total change in his demeanor. Produce your alchemist identification, and I will absolutely act whatever way you want me to act. But if you deliberately pretended to be a heaven-grade alchemist to deceive the 5 great sects, then what? Everybody knew that the Alchemist Society did not actually announce Ling Han as the 3rd heaven-grade alchemist to the world. So Ling Han naturally also could not possibly possess any proof of identification. Mao Jun used this as a counter. If you can't prove that you are really a heaven-grade alchemist, then you are going against your elders. This is a big disrespect. At this moment, the other grey-cloaked old man gestured with his hand, and said, Since you are a disciple of the Restore Heaven Academy, we still have to grant you an opportunity to make amends. Ling Han, you have obtained a mystical power very good. Offer it to the Academy and it could be recorded as a great merit for you. Such secret techniques, of course, have to remain in the Academy and be given to the most suitable person to cultivate. Mao Jun immediately added. The other grey-cloaked old man turned towards the people behind him and asked, You all, is that not right? Elder Qi is right. Many nodded their heads in succession. Most of them were disciples of the Restore Heaven Academy, while a minority were disciples of the 5 great sections. Ling Han, quickly hand over the mystical power. Right, this is not something a puny spiritual infant tier warrior like you could possess. Such secret techniques naturally will need the Academy to judge who is the most appropriate to learn it. These people kept on pointing fingers at Ling Han while shouting with indignant looks, seeming as if like the secret technique that Ling Han had snatched away was theirs. Ling Han shook his head and sighed. Could the lot of you be any more shameless than this? Ling Han, do you intend to ignore the big picture here? Mao Jun exclaimed in a thick voice. Disasters could possibly befall the world at any time. If this mystical power were to be handed to the mightiest of the 5 great sects to cultivate, it will give more assurance in resisting against adversities and calamities in the future. You, for the sake of your own power, actually cast aside the safety of the people with disregard? People like you hang, so selfish. Fuck, to actually be shameless to such a bold and forceful extent. Ling Han could not help but give a mocking laugh out of extreme anger as he retorted sarcastically. I have always thought that there was a limit to a person's shamelessness, yet the two of you actually brought it to new heights over and over again. I really salute to you both. Ling Han, it is still not too late to turn back. The other grey-cloaked old man who was known as Qi Ligua shook his head. His face filled with obvious amiability. Don't persist with such wrongdoings anymore. Opposing everyone will make you destined to cut a sorry figure. Ling Han's gaze deepened as he said, You also knew that to oppose the people of the world would only come to a bad end? But from the looks of it, the both of you seemed rather quite merry in doing it. Mao Jun and Qi Ligua both felt a quiver in their hearts simultaneously. What did this kid mean by uttering such words? Could it be that he knew of the matter concerning the realm pill? Impossible, all the evidence in the past 10,000 years had been destroyed, and the brainwashing was also exceedingly successful. Any who spoke of the realm pill's matter, on the contrary, would be laughed at by others and even more so beaten to death. Daring to slander the 5 great sects, bad-mouthing the meritorious great people? Wasn't this courting death? Hand over the mystical power. Mao Jun was playing the bad guy, while Qi Ligua played the nice guy. Ling Han smiled thinly and countered, Heaven Tier and Shattering Void Tier elites are not making any move to strike, so all you can do is only roar at me. Dare to make a move? Such an arrogant junior. Both Mao Jun and Qi Ligua's expressions abruptly change. They were but in the deity transformation tier, yet they were actually looked down upon by a junior of the spiritual infant tier. But after witnessing Ling Han's battle prowess earlier, who would dare to rashly strike out? To suppress Ling Han, except for Heaven Tier and Shattering Void Tier elite, then there were only Su Xiaoran, Dong Linger, Jia Ming, these few in the young generation with extraordinary battle prowess. They were not aware that Jia Ming had already been beaten by Ling Han almost to the point of death. Otherwise, they definitely would have tread even more carefully. You both are making me feel really irked, so I shall slaughter you both first. Ling Han's figure leapt forth, and without the least hesitation, he drew out the Revere Life Sword, then charged in the direction of Qi Ligua. Hang! They snorted. A spiritual infant tier junior actually dared to initiate an attack against them. This was completely underestimating them. Chapter 733. Double Kill. Henyi. Ling Han's first move was a huge one as there were too many elites present. It was unpredictable as to whether someone at the Heaven Tier or Shattering Void Tier would suddenly jump out and attack. Therefore, he had to be decisive and end the battle in the shortest time possible. Killing a teacher of the academy was a serious crime. However, with Ling Han's temper, would he care? Kill first, talk later. Shwa. The sword ray was like a blaze. Although the Revere Life Sword could not be fully activated, with Ling Han's strength, it could still bring about the destructive power of the deity transformation tier, taking the form of a frightening killing array as it whirled towards Mao Jun and his partner. This is not an ordinary sword ray. Sword array. Mao Jun and the other were both frightened out of their wits. How could it be like this? It was only a sword, but it could unleash sword ray that would automatically form a killing array. At first glance, their hearts were filled with fear, and their only thought was to escape. In actual fact, the destructive power of the killing array was indeed frightening. Before this, it was bent on killing Ling Han. Had it not been for Ling Han's comprehension, which countered its strength with gentleness, it would have been impossible for him to obtain this precious sword. Yet he had only obtained the sword, and not conquered either. Was a huge difference between the two. Once the killing array was launched, it was equal to it joining forces with Ling Han, and could even slay a high-level deity transformation tier cultivator. How formidable was that? With just a few moves, Mao Jun and the other were both heavily scarred and covered in blood. Everyone was staring in awe. This was really too strong. Battling one on a higher cultivation tier was already so violent. Wouldn't it mean that if Ling Han were to reach the Heaven Tier, he would be qualified to compete against the strongest in the world? With Ling Han's age and cultivation level, who would have considered how long the spiritual infant tier and deity transformation tier could suppress him? Brother Mao, let's launch our ultimate moves together. As long as we can withstand a few more moves, reinforcements will surely arrive, said Qi Ligua. All right. Mao Jun's expression appeared concentrated. Suddenly, there was ray of thunder spiraling around his body, while his eyes were blazing brightly as if they had become electric eyes. In order to launch a great move, there were only two options. Firstly, one had to take the time to gain momentum. The so-called major move would naturally be extremely powerful and far superior to ordinary attacks. However, it would also have taken longer to accumulate power. The natural law was fair, after all. Yet, one could make the time of power storage become extremely short, even as short as the time taken to launch a normal strike, but there was a price to be paid. To launch a major move quickly, one could do so by means of self-damaging or overdrawing. It was like, as the saying went, killing 1,000 enemies by sacrificing 800 of your own. Generally speaking, no one would easily choose the second option. Most would just make use of the time of going through the battle to store up enough power, and then launch a major move which could decide the victory with a single strike. However, where would Mao Jun have the time to go through the battle? Under the murderous attack of Ling Han and sword array combined, he had to go all out with every move. Each exchange left behind blood and grievous wounds, yet he still wanted to store up power to launch a major move? It would be almost the same as courting death. Therefore, he could only force a major move at the expense of suffering some damage. Hong, his whole person morphed into lightning. His height reached almost 30 meters, like a giant. Brother Qi, you're fuck. Mao Jun was just about to tell Qi Li Gua to attack Ling Han together from both sides, but when he glanced in that direction, he discovered that the other party had actually escaped without a trace. The other party's proposal of attacking together was obviously a lie. Its purpose was just to mislead him into going all out so as to buy time for the other party to escape. Qi Li Gua, fuck 18 generations of your family's ancestors. Mao Jun screamed. Making him fight alone against Ling Han, he wouldn't be able to drag out the battle for any longer even if he could unleash a major move. And what about after the major move? He would fall into a state of extreme weakness, and could only be trampled on. Brother Mao, I shall bring people back to avenge you. The voice of Qi Li Gua was heard in the distance. How shameless. Ling Han gave a cold smile. His figure rose. He temporarily kept the Revere Life Sword inside the Black Tower and took out the Sunset Bow, then notched an arrow forged from precious metal. Simultaneously, 3 mystical powers were activated and locked onto Qi Li Gua. Hee. Mao Jun saw this, and chose to keep quiet, standing by. Xiao, an arrow star. Qi Li Gua was really an idiot. Originally, he'd thought that since there was Mao Jun to counter Ling Han while he escaped so far away, he would be safe. Yet, in the moment when he was most relaxed, the attack reached him quickly, accurately and fiercely. Pooh! An arrow penetrated his heart. This arrow was known to exterminate dragons and destroy the stars. In addition to the destructive spirit of the thunderclap ninth heaven, it could really pierce through one's weak point like a bullseye. The power of this arrow was naturally horrifying to the extreme. Qi Li Gua staggered forward a few more steps before slowly turning his body around. He stared blankly at Ling Han and Mao Jun, completely confused. However, when he saw the sneer on Mao Jun's lips, he finally regretted escaping. If he had chosen to fight alongside Mao Jun and launch a major move together in unison, there might be a chance that they could have resisted Ling Han and stalled for time until the arrival of reinforcements. Yet, he didn't want to go all out to fight, so he had abandoned Mao Jun. On the contrary, it had turned out that he was the one to be finished first. How regretful he was of his past deeds. He crashed to the ground with blood gushing out from his pierced heart, staining the ground red. Xiao, Mao Jun dodged quickly. His body was now in the transformed state of lightning. Although it wasn't a mystical power, his speed was still shockingly fast. Ling Han brandished the blood-sucking origin gold, retrieved the precious arrow that he had shot, and rushed to chase down Mao Jun. His body had also transformed into lightning. It could be seen that his speed was obviously faster than the other parties, and he was rapidly shortening the distance between the two of them. Zhu Xian, Hu Niu, and Rabbit also quickly followed. Mao Jun was in panic. Now, he had only one thought in mind, which was to flee for his life. The young man behind him was too terrifying, and definitely not someone whom he could match. His speed indeed wasn't slow, and in front of him, a person had appeared. The person had a slender body and was seemingly ordinary, but when one looked into his eyes, one would find himself looking into a starry universe with unlimited space. Su Xiu ran. He was overjoyed and shouted, "Martial nephew Su, save me!" However, Su Xiu Ran had a grave expression. He extended his hand and shouted, "Be careful!" Be careful about what? Mao Jun gaped. Pooh! What could be seen was a long sword that passed through his body, with its killing intent swirling, and his soul was quickly wiped out. Pa! His body lost all its strength and slipped to the ground following the sword's blade. Ling Han retrieved the sword and looked at Su Xiu Ran coldly. He didn't mind slaughtering another genius of the Absolute Saber sect. Eliminating one elite from the 5 sects was equivalent to removing one obstacle towards the future splitting open of the skies. Especially so for geniuses like Su Xiaoran and Jia Ming. These two were bound to be difficult opponents in the future. That was Mao Jun of the Azure Thunder sect. Su Xiaoran spoke up. So what? Ling Han said coldly. Chapter 734. Fight again with the Absolute Saber. Henyi. Henyi. So what you mean is, I'll be dead? Ling Han spoke with indifference. You can't be any more dead than you already are. Su Xiaoran nodded. Right now, you are just a breathing corpse. The 5 great sects ruled the realm for more than 10 or even 20,000 years. This was an extremely long time. Their rule couldn't be shaken. After accumulation of 10,000 years, the quantity of shattering void tier elites in particular was excessive to the point of making every party lose hope. What could possibly go wrong killing a brat at mere spiritual infant tier? Even if Ling Han was now in the shattering void tier, so what? Being chased by hundreds of shattering void tier warriors, even if his battle prowess was in defiance of the natural order, he could only die with resentment. One had to know that out of those who could cultivate until the shattering void tier, how many could actually shatter the void and become immortal? And which one of them wasn't a phenomenal genius of his or her era? Would one be able to bypass the ranks and kill them off so easily? The strength of humanity at its peak. Ling Han laughed and said, Then let this corpse destroy you first. Is that possible? Su Xiaoran instantly pulled out the Absolute Saber. I've had an enlightening encounter. My comprehension on the path of the saber had risen a level higher, allowing me to double Absolute Saber's power and capability. Today, what do you have to counter me? He was indeed proud. Previously, even with the full recovery of the Demon Birth Sword, it was equally matched with the Absolute Saber. Now that the latter's power and capability had doubled, it would naturally be suppressed entirely. Oh, is it? Ling Han smiled slightly. He wasn't afraid, because what he would be using now wasn't the Demon Birth Sword. Generally speaking, should worse come to worst, he still had the Black Tower. Su Xiaoran stopped talking and just stared at Ling Han. Saber chi overflowed from his body and transformed into a heavenly saber devoid of shadow behind him. This was extremely terrifying. Obviously, he was merely at the deity transformation tier, yet this heavenly saber astonishingly had the aura of the heaven tier. A super genius who could battle an opponent superior to himself by a whole cultivation tier. The heavenly saber slashed down. It was about 300 meters long, so the area which fell within its range was amazing. Ling Han raised his fists to counter the attack. In this one strike, the opponent did not use the Absolute Saber to fight. Hence, Ling Han wanted to see how much was the difference between him and this #1 genius of the Absolute Saber sect. He did not dare to underestimate Su Xiaoran, so this punch had utilized his full strength. Hong, although he used a fist, Sword Ray actually appeared in a flash to greet the Heavenly Saber. As the Heavenly Saber smashed down, Sword Ray collapsed in an instant, the saber making an impact with Ling Han's fist. Wang, Ling Han's arm trembled like a wave, so much so that it was like a dough being flattened to make pastry. His arm had gone so far as to spread out like an opened umbrella. It was difficult to express how grotesque it was. With a slash of the saber, Ling Han was propelled over 20 meters backwards. A wound had formed on top of Ling Han's hand, and even some veins in his arm had burst open, dyeing his entire arm red. However, that was about it. Su Xiaoran could not help but express his shock. Merging of strength and gentleness? He furrowed his brows. Even ordinary body arts which had achieved the level of merging strength and gentleness wouldn't be able to withstand a strike of his saber. It was like a soft dough. No matter how soft, it should still be cut into two by a sharp blade. Ling Han shook his arm. As indestructible heaven scroll circulated, his body of diamond was able to automatically heal itself. In an instant, the injury was healed, leaving his skin smooth and glowing like a jade under the light. Su Xiaoran remained cool. He kept the Absolute Saber in a vertical position. Although he had absolute confidence that he could cut down Ling Han with his own strength, he attached more importance to the outcome of the overall situation. This kind of evildoer had to be eradicated as soon as possible, and absolutely couldn't be allowed to become a danger later. Therefore, he'd use the absolute saber to exterminate the opponent without any second thoughts. Wang, the absolute saber was slightly shining despite having been already damaged. The saber's blade was mottled, but it still emitted a terrifyingly suppressive qi which spread far and wide. The saber intent was flowing, making it come alive. It was as if it had its own will, and was no longer under the control of Su Xiaofan. The strong were naturally proud. Who could control it? Ling Han held up the Revere Life Sword. Wang, this sword seemed to have felt the threat. The markings on the blade glowed, with a murderous aura encircling it. This was a killing array. Hong, the absolute saber was exuding an amazing brilliance which soared into the sky, masking the sun's rays and causing it to appear bleak. At this moment, it seemed to transform into shattering void tier's supreme capability of being able to cut down everything. On the other hand, the Revere Life Sword's array pattern's glow remained sleek and restrained. It seemed to have become an ordinary sword, but Ling Han knew that at this moment, this killing sword had also entered into a state of killing any god or Buddha that dared to block its path. A dog that bit would not bark. The strongest killing sword naturally didn't require an extravagant appearance to show off its power. It was a sword of massacre. Its everything was meant to kill. Su Xiaofan was surprised. Naturally, he was able to recognize that this was not the level 10 spirit tool previously used by Ling Han. Ling Han was certainly aware of Absolute Saber's power. Nevertheless, he had switched to another sword to fight it. What was the meaning of this? Could it be that this sword was stronger? He really didn't believe it. Would it be so easy to get a 10th tier spirit tool? Even shattering void tier elites wouldn't be able to have one in each hand. Did he think that the quantity of level 10 precious metals was too much to count? It was incredible enough to possess one, but to be able to switch to another. It was really hard to believe. Hong, the absolute saber, took the initiative to kill and smash towards Ling Han. The Revere Life Sword had also come out from under Ling Han's control, and automatically flew up as unlimited sword ray dazzled around it. It shot towards the absolute saber. Pang! The two exceptional spirit tools collided powerfully. In the terrifying aftermath, everything was shaken. The earth was suddenly split open, and the sun in the sky was also on the verge of collapse. The sun was a gigantic ball of fire itself. How could it hold such a strong impact? After a single blow, the Absolute Saber and the Revere Life Sword were both thrust back in succession. The Absolute Saber emitted black light and shadow, while Revere Life Sword then led the way with endless white light. The two had divided the world into black and white, absolutely in opposition to one another. Su Xiaofan expression finally changed. The Absolute Saber had not gained the upper hand. How was that possible? The Absolute Saber was a weapon used by a powerful god during ancient times. Originally, it was just an ordinary weapon. The material used was at most of level 3, but having been nourished gently and unceasingly with the essence of the powerful god, this saber had gradually detached itself from the womb of the ordinary and became a genuine heavenly saber. That powerful god was the backbone of the saber. Therefore, even though it had gone through thousands of years, so much so that this saber had been damaged, if there was still a part of the saber left, it would still be the most powerful spirit tool in the world. Among level 10 spirit tools, this one could definitely be included in the top 10. Even being placed within the top 3 would not be an exaggeration. However, the very same saber had been blocked. What kind of sword was that? It was too much in defiance of the natural order. Ling Han smiled lightly and said, "It seems that our spirit tools cannot be used." Now the two precious weapons had activated, fighting independently among themselves. Neither Ling Han nor Su Xiaofan could intervene. How capable were they to interfere with the battle among shattering void tier creations? However, Ling Han possessed quite a lot of spirit tools. He instantly took out Demon Birth Sword and said, "Come, let's fight." Despite Su Xunran's temperament, he couldn't help but want to curse. This fellow still had yet another level 10 spirit tool. Fortunately, if the level 10 spirit tool had not awakened, then fighting against it wasn't an impossibility. He used the palm of his hand like a saber with the Absolute Saber. How could he still spare other sabers a glance and need other sabers? Now he would have to beat Ling Han with his bare hands. Chapter 735. The Flame King makes a move. Henyi! Henyi! Hang! A horrifying aura shook the earth as a figure flitted over with such astonishing speed that even the light rays emitted by the Absolute Saber and the Revere Life Sword also would not be able to conceal him. This man was of a tall and broad stature, with his upper body bare, the bulging muscles in clear view. He remained afloat in midair akin to a high mountain, which people could only look up at. Lord Gulin. Su Xiao ran hastily bowed in a respectful manner. This was a shattering void tier elite. If not, even a heaven tier elite simply could not break into the combat range of the Absolute Saber and the Revere Life Sword. The earth-overturning seal mystical power is on this person? Gulin asked. He was an elite cultivator of the Earth Dragon sect, and naturally was renowned for his physical skills. He did not need origin power to defend his physical body. Thus, he just allowed the sword and saber to slash forth onto his chest, which resulted in a burst of innumerable flying sparks, yet either was unable to even injure him in the least. After all, these were but the aftermath of the combat. Precisely so, my lord. Su Xiao answered respectfully. Gulin nodded and immediately struck out with a palm to grab Ling Han. As a shattering void tier elite, he naturally had no need to heed any rules of conduct, and had the liberty to act as he pleased. So what if he offended all the elites of the entire world? If he intended to flee, then he definitely would be able to flee. As a result, his nature was willful, of course. Facing just a puny spiritual infant tier junior, he naturally did not need to take him seriously, and couldn't even bother with an interrogation. Wasn't it better to just directly seize him? At that moment, Ling Han wanted to enter into the Black Tower. It definitely was not possible for him to oppose the attack a shattering void tier elite made unless the demon birth sword once again acted on its own and came back to life. However, that sword now was not showing any response, so evidently it was not going to get him out of this predicament. Really promising, you even struck out against a junior. A disdainful voice drifted over, and a huge hand pressed down and hit Gulin's palm. The huge palms, which each seemed as huge as a mountain peak, that stretched forth were formed of origin power. Expectedly, it caused immediate thunderous rumble in the wake of their collision, exuding terrifying strength all around, making the sun in the sky flicker waveringly for an instant almost like it was going to die out. A man with his body engulfed in flames emerged. He had a slender figure, his long hair draped over his shoulders, and his hair was similarly also entwined in flames, dancing dearly around his locks. Multiple blooms of Tao made up of flames burst forth at his feet, making him akin to the embodiment of a king of flames. Flame King! Gulin gave a muffled snort as killing intent in his gaze flared up. He demanded, "You dare to meddle in others' business?" "Whatever I want to do, what business is it of yours?" The Flame King replied with nonchalance. "Hung, better scram this instant if you don't want to see your downfall here." Gulin shouted. The Flame King held both his hands behind his back, and responded, "Could it be that you didn't know that this is a historical site left behind by the ancient dynasty we founded countless years ago? The earth-overturning seal that you covet is precisely the mystical power mastered by Seventh, the Earth Spirit King. Since I am already here, how could I sit by and watch this mystical power fall into the hands of the 5 great sects?" Gulin was stunned. No wonder the Purple Moon Kingdom was so powerful at that time. They wiped out the 5 great sects, and nearly broke off and ended their legacy. Were it not for the fact that the 5 great sects had their roots in the immortal realm, they really would possibly have disappeared forever. Could the mystical power actually be passed on? What kind of notion was this? It meant this mystical power had reached the level of great accomplishment. The Flame King seemingly had no interest whatsoever in this mystical power, and yet what did this imply? Thinking up to this point, Gulin immediately shuddered in fear. The Purple Moon Kingdom was staging a comeback, so could they really reenact the glory of a good many thousand years ago? No, this time their strength was much, much stronger, and elites of the Shattering Void tier had also increased more than 4-fold. Moreover, the natural environment had also reached the summit in these 10,000 years, giving rise to innumerable geniuses' appearance. Looking from the other way around, though the Purple Moon Kingdom had changed its name, its strength was unlikely to have many changes. He calmed down his nerves as he answered in a composed manner, "Since you do not want it, why bother meddling in other people's business?" Ha, I do not want it, but also cannot let an idiot like you gain from it." The Flame King sneered. Furthermore, This mystical power was taken out from the library by this person. He was chosen by the mystical power, so how could it be coveted by idiots like you? Gu Lin could not restrain the fury that was raging through him. He was an impressive shattering void tier elite, and now, being repeatedly called an idiot, how could he tolerate such insult? Then I shall kill you first. Gu Lin sneered, the shadow of a big serpent manifesting behind him, abruptly twisting forth in the direction of the Flame King. The Flame King stretched out his right hand and grasped, and boom, an enormous fiery tiger as big as a mountain jumped to meet that big serpent head-on. Pang, 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 the big serpent and the fiery tiger were locked in fierce combat, but before long, it was already painfully obvious which was the stronger of the two. The big serpent was defeated, with its head being stepped on underneath the paws of the fiery tiger, expending its strength in useless struggle. Trash! The Flame King coldly scoffed. Gu Lin was indignant, but his strength was evidently inferior in comparison, so what could he do about it? At that time, the 8 great kings could already wipe out the 5 great sects, and it was for no other reason than that these 8 great kings being indeed incomparably powerful. Hee hee, Flame King, how greatly imposing! Another person's shadow appeared, completely fearless of the combat between the Absolute Saber and the Revere Life Sword. It was a man as mild as jade, bearing a slender figure, and with a long sword behind his back. He had a divine air around him, but the most peculiar part was his eyes. The pupils were actually 2 swords, looking extremely weird and bizarre. You are the garbage of the Heaven Sword sect, right? The Flame King swept his gaze over casually, seemingly unconcerned with the 2 formidable shattering void tier elites. Heaven Sword sect, Ma Yu Tang, greets the Flame King, this sword-bearing man remarked as he warmly smiled, and even clasped his hands in greeting. The Flame King paid him no heed and just gazed at Ling Han as he said, Young man, your luck is not bad. This sword was made by His Imperial Majesty's own hands, and you have also obtained our 7th brother's mystical power. Seems like you are destined to have fate with our Purple Moon Kingdom. Just leave, the present situation is not something one with your kind of skills could engage in. Ling Han naturally had no intention to interfere in a fight between shattering void tiers. He retrieved the Revere Life Sword at once and, taking along Zhu Xian Air, immediately executed the motion technique to depart, Hu Niu and Rabbit naturally following near behind. Did I say you could leave? Gu Lin stretched out his hand to grab in Ling Han's direction. Boom, flames swept across, forcefully compelling Gu Lin to retreat. It was precisely the Flame King who made a move. He then proudly growled. I already said they could leave, yet you still dare to make a move? Is this not courting death? Hang, now is not like how it was at that time. The Purple Moon Kingdom has long become nothing but history already. Antiques like the lot of you should also thoroughly disappear. You already do not belong to this era anymore, Gu Lin retorted. Ma Yu Tang also made a move and struck forth, grasping in the direction of Ling Han. There was a mystical power on this fellow, so he absolutely could not be allowed to leave. The Flame King once again struck out with a fist and held back Ma Yu Tang as well. He loftily laughed and jeered. I am still here and you lot still want to create trouble? Team up! Chapter 736. Earth Overturning Seal. Henyi. Henyi. Having the Flame King to fend off the pursuers, Ling Han naturally escaped with ease. He very quickly came upon the herb garden area, but did not waste time to scout around, but rather directly passed through all the way while heading in the direction out of the mystery realm. He was deep in thought while he moved, pondering his next course of action. After killing both Mao Jun and Qi Li Gua, could he still return to the Restore Heaven Academy? These two were not exactly just simple deity transformation tier warriors only, for they also held the title of teachers of the Restore Heaven Academy. Going against one's elders, especially murdering one's teacher, was considered as an act wicked beyond redemption in the world of martial arts. Although Ling Han had never even met them before. The key point was, the stance of the Alchemist Society was too ambiguous as they did not recognize his status as a heaven-grade alchemist all this while. Otherwise, so what if he had slain 2 deity transformation tiers? What were they going to do? Oftentimes, status was really very important. The most important thing was, he still had the earth overturning seal on him, and the elites from the 5 great sects eyeing it definitely would not be few. Who could guarantee that some bastard would not suddenly make a move and directly search his soul for the secret? Leaving aside the rest, just looking at how Mao Jun and Chiligua behaved, he would already have known that the 5 great sects, should they want to be shameless, could really show a total disregard of shame to the most extreme extent. Ling Han reconsidered and gave up. His staying at the Restore Heaven Academy was because of wanting to take in followers, but now there was the Rain Emperor and Murong Qing to take care of that, and they seemingly also had no need of him. When it came to taking in followers, definitely the Rain Emperor was even more skilled at it given he was originally an emperor, adept at winning the hearts of the people, good at judging rewards and punishment as appropriate. He naturally was exceptionally good at it. In that case, he could just leave it to these 2 brothers of his. Then I shall just portray the image of a disciple who was forced to turn against the Restore Heaven Academy, and start a dispute with them. A smile broke out on Ling Han's face. Before long, he could already break through to the deity transformation tier, and by then, his battle prowess would allow him to match the heaven tier. By then, in the world, those that could suppress him would really be miserably few, and he would already possess the qualifications to run wild. He decided to join the armed forces of the Flame King to hasten the downfall of the 5 great sections. He also would not know when the 10,000 years period would end. Perhaps in a few years, or maybe 100, the 5 sects of the immortal realm would act and begin the concocting and refining of the realm pill. Wipe out the 5 great sects as soon as possible, unifying the entire world under one ruler to get rid of the last obstacle in the course of splitting open the skies. With his mind made up, Ling Han was no longer hesitant. Zhu Xian, Hu Niu, and Rabbit naturally would not have any comments. As for Yuan Chang He and Li Feng Yu and his sister, Ling Han also did not intend to bring them along with him. He'd just let them return to the academy when the time to fight came. He'd just give a clarion call and have them change sides. He kept Zhu Xian and Rabbit in the Black Tower, launching the thunderclap 9th heaven as he hurried on his journey at full speed. Hu Niu also similarly transformed into a lightning bolt and followed closely beside Ling Han, seemingly still with more than enough strength. On the other hand, the gold-seeking rat was still being carried along by Ling Han. It'd occasionally still discover the whereabouts of precious metals, which Ling Han would then collect in passing. Although it wasted some time, it did not have too much of an impact. 7 days later, he finally flew out of the mystery realm, and remained nearby the armed forces of the Flame King while he awaited the latter's appearance. Of course, he did not just sit around waiting, and immediately entered the Black Tower to begin studying the Earth Overturning Seal. Judging from Flame King's words, it seemed that the 8 great kings had each mastered a mystical power, and moreover had perfected them to a great extent, for only then could they have passed on that mystical power, and the thunderclap 9th heaven was also left by one person among them. What made Ling Han feel perplexed was something else. Why did the 8 great kings not learn from each other? In that way, everyone would have grasped all 8 mystical powers, and how awesome would that be? Is it being a case of biting more than one could chew? He muttered to himself, then chuckled as it occurred to him that he had not actually seen the 8 great kings striking out with their full strength. How would he know if they had not mastered all the 8 mystical powers? 8 mystical powers. Just thinking about it already makes one feel a little excited. Ling Han smilingly remarked, but on second thought, no matter how many mystical powers he possessed, he might not necessarily be able to put all of them to good use at the same time. For instance, so what if he had learned 2 archery-type mystical powers if he could only use one at one time? Furthermore, dividing one's energy between 2 mystical powers that were almost identical in nature was indeed pretty much a waste of time. Whatever, let's first learn this mystical power, and then decide if it is suitable for me. Ling Han stuck that bead onto his forehead. A stream of consciousness surged in, immediately triggering a reaction from the bead, which transformed into rays of light that poured into his mind. A person's shadow emerged. It was of great height and powerful build. Both his hands were sealed tight, and were in the midst of circulating some kind of secret technique. There were closely intertwined patterns on that person's hands, which were akin to an exquisite drawing that was in line with some kind of natural law, and one could not help but follow his movements. Boom, 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 the sealed hands struck, and it was earth-shaking. Earth Overturning Seal could destroy the earth if cultivated to very significant extent. After that shadow completed demonstrating, he actually left behind a few words. Basically, the Earth Overturning Seal was not complete, and could only be considered as half of the form. The complete seal was known as Sky's Toppling Earth Overturning Seal, and merging both seals would really topple the skies and overturn the earth, wiping out the universe. Ling Han could not help but feel a rush of excitement. This earth-overturning seal was already so awesome, so if he merged both seals, then it absolutely had to be strong to the extent of having no friends. He then started to cultivate. Even though progress was also quite slow with his brilliant intelligence, this was a mystical power, not just a simple martial art technique containing some kind of natural law. Fortunately, his comprehension ability was really terrifying. Although there was no one to give him guidance, the intricacies within were slowly and forcibly seen through by him. He unceasingly made ah, oh, and exclamations in marvel. So that's how it is, so it's actually like this. Half a month later, he finally had achieved minor accomplishment level, and could finally use the seal. He made Rabbit become his sparring partner. As the earth-overturning seal unfurled, both hands were covered with patterns, glinting and shining as if he himself was a god, which made Rabbit feel like sneaking away on the spot. But it was being pinned down by Hunyo's glare, and thus had no choice but to brace itself. Between having a sparring match with Ling Han and being bitten by Hunyo, it resolutely chose the former, signifying that Hunyo was the more frightful of the two. However, Rabbit was downright shameless. How could it be depended on to spar seriously? It very quickly cried out in surrender, and refused to continue to spar no matter what. Ling Han also did not press further, as he had already roughly gauged the strength and capabilities of this mystical power. Very powerful. But it should not be better than the Exterminating Dragon Star Arrow. Nevertheless, Exterminating Dragon Star Arrow was a long-range attack, while Earth-Overturning Seal was actually suitable for all distances near and far, and when combined with his strong physique, it could bring out perfect results. If I were to use my right hand to draw forth my sword techniques and my left hand to launch the earth-overturning seal, then wouldn't the force be even stronger? Ling Han's mind was abuzz with ideas. This was not entirely impossible, because the sky's toppling earth-overturning seal was originally two seals, one hand toppling the sky, the other hand overturning the earth. Now he had only learned earth-overturning seal, so why couldn't he use one hand to bring it forth? Moreover, the earth-overturning seal ought to have been originally executed with one hand, but because the sky's toppling seal's legacy wasn't left behind, the earth-overturning seal's two-handed execution was developed to draw out greater force, Ling Han deduced. What I have to do is trace the path and find the roots to let the earth-overturning seal regain its original form. Although using one hand is not stronger than using two, the benefit is that I'll have freed my other hand and could use a sword technique, or even a fist technique or a palm technique. But this will then require me to multitask, dividing my focus to do two things at one time. Chapter 737. Recruitment. Henyi. Multitasking was nothing too difficult for a cultivator, but if one wanted to develop two high-grade secret techniques to their maximum limit, that was difficult to do. Ling Han began to study the earth-overturning seal first, aiming to reach the point that he would be able to use it single-handedly. The difficulty of this did not originate from the moves, and in truth, mystical powers did not have any moves per set. Hat was the case with the four mystical powers Ling Han had learned to date, at least. Instead, mystical powers merely taught you how to circulate your origin power so that it would adhere to some specific pattern, but exactly how one was to put it to use was entirely up to himself. For example, in the case of the earth-overturning seal, both hands would be covered fully with unique patterns. The formidable power of this mystical power originated from these patterns, as they possessed incredibly terrifying destructive power. It was the same for the Exterminating Dragon Star Arrow. Concentrating the patterns on the arrow allowed Ling Han to fire an arrow with formidable destructive power. Thus, this archery technique did not even need a real arrow and bow, as he himself could become the bow and his origin power could be formed into an arrow, and he would still be able to fire out projectiles with extremely strong destructive power. What Ling Han had to do was to combine the patterns that were originally spread out onto two hands on a single hand. He studied and practiced in earnest. Time passed very quickly, and in the blink of an eye, another month had passed, and he finally smiled. Stretching open his left hand, the patterns were closely intertwined, but the odd thing was that the demonic patterns actually resonated and combined with the earth-overturning seal. Though they are completely different, why do I see a similarity? Ling Han was curious. This is the power of regulation. Small tower appeared. Regulation. Ling Han mumbled. Small Tower had said long ago that the demonic patterns were the culmination of the regulation of the realm. He only knew that they possessed great power, but did not know why. He said, "Come, explain the details to me." "I don't have any such duty." Small Tower was very tsundere. However, what we know as mystical powers touch slightly on the boundary of the regulation of a realm, so cultivate these mystical powers well, as that would be highly beneficial to you. Even if it did not say so, he knew that for a fact. Ling Han was very gloomy. This damned tsundere tower completely did not treat him like a master. One day, he would definitely stuff it down the toilet so that it could earnestly reflect on the errors of its ways. He exited the Black Tower to take a look, yet saw that the army the Flame King had disappeared, and there was a flag symbolizing the Purple Moon Empire raised at the nearby city gates. Obviously, the Flame King had already conquered the city, and continued on his way to expand his territory. Ling Han released the others from the Black Tower, and they headed towards the city. He had to make discreet inquiries about the current situation. Apparently, the Lunar King had brought another army over half a month ago, and joined troops with the Flame King. With two ultimate elites attacking fiercely at the same time, they had completely routed the various parties responsible for guarding the city, and had forced the alliance army of the five great sects into retreat yet again. "Recruiting, recruiting!" A soldier was yelling out loudly on the street. "Join our Purple Moon Army, and there is a chance you will be able to learn high-grade martial arts and cultivation techniques. Those who pass by, if you want to become friends with the ultimate elites, you should not miss this opportunity." Ling Han could not help but feel an urge to laugh. Ma Duo Bao was undependable, and the soldiers under his banner were not really all that dependable, either. This slogan for troop recruitment would really make one want to laugh. However, using the temptation of cultivation and martial arts techniques would still attract many to join. There were many who were stagnant at some cultivation level. It wasn't that they did not have enough talent, nor was it that they did not have enough resources. What they lacked was higher-grade cultivation techniques. "I can only advance to the deity transformation tier with my cultivation technique, so how then am I supposed to break through to the heaven tier?" was what they thought. Although there were indeed alchemical pills that could allow a cultivator to reach the summit in a single step, there were pitifully few of them. Only if one had luck that defied natural law would he be able to obtain them. But for the majority, they had very ordinary luck. Furthermore, high-grade cultivation techniques were treated as absolute treasures by powerful parties, and if they were not true disciples or clansmen at the core of the party, they were unable to cultivate at all. So, if they wanted to obtain high-grade cultivation techniques, what should they do? It was difficult. Thus, that was why there were so many willing to venture into ancient historical sites. What else could motivate them besides the prospect of being able to break out of their stagnation? And now, the Purple Moon Empire used their cultivation techniques and martial arts techniques to recruit troops for their army, so this was naturally tempting. Ling Han, too, wanted to take a look at the real situation in the Purple Moon Empire, so he said, "Come, let's try and enlist in the army." They walked over, and Ling Han asked, "Brother, if we enlist, would we be able to learn high-grade cultivation techniques?" "Of course, as long as you all can gain military merits," the soldier replied. "Oh, how would we be able to do that?" There was a considerable number of people gathered around. The soldier cleared his throat and said loudly, "How to get cultivation and martial arts techniques? I've already explained this many times, but every time, a new friend would come over. Thus I will still endlessly explain, and for those who had not heard this before, listen closely. In our Purple Moon Army, there are a total of 5 military ranks: King, General, Colonel, Captain, and Private. As long as you can enlist, you would be a private, which is the lowest rank. Any private would be able to learn a level 6 cultivation technique of their choice, which will ensure you will be able to break through to the Flower Blossom tier." Hiss! The masses gasped in surprise. For the majority of the people here, this was the first time they had heard this, so it was naturally inevitable that they would be astonished. Even though this was the middle state, where the overall martial arts level was the most prosperous, Flower Blossom tier signified casting off one's mortal chains and gaining an additional 200 years of life. No matter where, someone like that would definitely be considered a master, and whichever party they entered, they would be placed in important positions. But it was precisely because of this reason that level 6 cultivation techniques were not easy to get. Who knew how many people were stuck on the spiritual pedestal tier because, Firstly, their talent and resources were inadequate, and secondly, they did not possess suitable cultivation techniques. Thus, how could they be capable of casting off their mortal chains? Most importantly, breaking through to the flower blossom tier would mean an additional 200 years of lifespan, and this exceeded any kind of life-extending spiritual herbs effect. Who wouldn't want that? The soldier snickered and said, "However, it is not that simple to become a soldier. At least, you would have to be in the spiritual ocean tier. And after becoming a soldier, after every battle, or after completing a mission, there will be an accounting of your military merit. When your military merit has reached the bar, you would be promoted from private to captain. And a captain would be able to obtain a complete level 7 cultivation technique, an earth-grade cultivation technique. Similarly, if you accumulate even more merits, you'll be promoted and become a colonel, a general, and a king. And if you become a king, not only will you be able to choose any cultivation technique you want, you can even get a mystical power." A mystical power. Everyone could feel their hair stand on ends from the shock. Although the majority did not know what a mystical power was, with the word mystical, how could it not be something awesome? Island list. Island list. Everyone raised their hands respectively. The soldier laughed and gave each person a piece of paper. The word recruitment was written on it. He said, "Take this piece of paper to the training camp in the north of the city and undertake the test for new recruits. Only if you pass would you all be able to enlist. Additionally, you would only be part of reserve troops. You must complete the training before you can officially become a private. If not, even if we allow you to go into the battlegrounds, you would only be going straight to your deaths. You have to understand, our Purple Moon Army is well known for having a low casualty and injury rate." The crowds dispersed, thinking that even though they were not any Supreme Master, no matter what, they were still at least future Supreme Masters that were in the spiritual ocean and the spiritual pedestal tier. How could it be that they couldn't even manage to become a normal private? Ling Han asked for 2 recruitment forms as well, one for himself, and the other for Zhu Xian Heir. He then said, "Let's go and play too." Forget about Hu Niu, how could she possibly obey quietly? They headed out to the north of the city. After exiting the city, there was a mountain peak not too far off, and at the foot of the mountain, there was a barracks which had the flag of the Purple Moon Empire raised over it. There was a large number of people gathered at the entrance. Chapter 738. New Recruits. Henyi. To enter the barracks, one first and foremost had to prove that they did indeed have spiritual ocean tier cultivation. Those who had yet to reach this cultivation level would not even have the opportunity to undergo the test. There were a total of 4 people. The oldest was an old man who looked to be in his 60s, with spiritual infant tier cultivation, followed by a bulky middle-aged man, who had similarly reached the spiritual infant tier. Then there was a young man who looked to be close to 30 years old, though his cultivation level was a bit weaker as he had only reached the flower blossom tier, and the last was a beautiful young girl, similarly in the flower blossom tier. Compared to the others who were only in the spiritual ocean and the spiritual pedestal tier, the 4 of them naturally appeared like swans amongst a flock of chickens, standing out against the norm. Ling Han cultivated an ancient technique, so his cultivation level was not apparent. Zhu Xian Heir, on the other hand, was similarly obvious with her cultivation in the flower blossom tier. Thankfully, she had disguised herself somewhat. Although she was still very beautiful, she was not as fatally exquisite as she had been before. Otherwise, the people here would go into a frenzy for her. Those that had achieved the requirement entered into the barracks. Ling Han slightly extended his aura and naturally entered as well. Hu Niu, meanwhile, was temporarily settled at the resting area, where she sat cross-legged together with Rabbit and began feasting merrily. A middle-aged man walked out. He was in the spiritual infant tier, his whole figure exuding a harsh, severe air. He had obviously experienced an unknown number of cruel battles. A mere look from him was enough to cause one's heart to shiver and legs to weaken. "Our Purple Moon Army has no desire for trash," he began. "I am Xiao Yongnian, your military instructor. You all have 2 months to convince me why I should agree to allow you to become soldiers. The door to the barracks lies there, and those who do not qualify, I will immediately throw them out. Tell me, are you all trash?" Everyone felt enraged. Although there were not many elites of the flower blossom tier, the others were at least in the spiritual ocean and the spiritual pedestal tier. If even they were considered trash, then there was really no limit to the height of the standards required. No! Everyone shouted, seemingly all at the same time. Very good. I hope that you all aren't trash as well, because the thing I hate the most is trash. Xiao Yongnian's eyes swept over the crowd. There is a total of 533 people here, but as far as I can see, only 50 people would be able to pass at most. From now onwards, I will use the strictest methods to train all of you. In my eyes, there is no difference between men and women, nor is there any difference between the elderly or youths. The only difference is those who qualify and those who do not. Those who do not want to undergo the training, get out of here immediately. This time, those who had been thinking of leaving had their pride provoked. If they left now, wouldn't they then become trash? Not one person moved a single step. Very good. None of you want to be trash. However, it is not you who determine whether you're trash or not, but me. Xiao Yongnian sneered. As a soldier, the most important thing is to obey commands. Even if a burning mountain lies in front of you, if you are ordered to advance, then you must not retreat. Now use the horse stance. Horse stance. That was a bit too elementary, right? Who amongst them had not advanced from the body refining tier? Who had not practiced the horse stance and stood on stumps before? The majority stood in the horse stance, but there were still a few that showed obvious disdain. Get lost! Xiao Yongnian immediately apprehended those few, and with a few tosses, shio shio shio, these people were sent flying out of the main entrance, where they fell pitifully. Everyone felt their hearts freeze. This was actually an elite in the spiritual infant tier. Tang, tang, tang. 10 soldiers marched out of the barracks. They were only in the spiritual pedestal tier. They were pushing a small cart, on which there lay multiple talisman papers. Do you think the horse stance is simple? Xiao Yongnian bared his teeth in a grin. With a wave of his hand, those 10 soldiers immediately circled round to the back of the masses, and began sticking paper talismans on their backs. So heavy! Those that had had talismans stuck onto their backs exclaimed. There were even a few that dropped on their backsides. This is a weight talisman. Different people will have different spiritual talismans attached. I guarantee that it is within the capacity you all can withstand, Xiao Yongnian announced coldly. All of you, get back to your feet and stand back in the horse stance position. Within 3 breaths, if anyone's posture is still not up to standard, I will throw him out. Those that had fallen onto the ground hurriedly got onto their feet. Some managed to get firmly into the horse stance, but there were some that once again flopped onto the ground. 3 breaths later, Xiao Yongnian indeed began to cast people out again, throwing those that did not meet the standards out of the barracks. Ling Han saw this and nodded internally. A cultivator was individually very strong, but to become a soldier, mere individual battle prowess was useless. If the Purple Moon Empire was unable to defeat the 5 great sects, or failed to split open the skies, then he would have to take on this mission. Thus, he began to be interested in commanding and training troops. Learning secretly from the Purple Moon Empire was undoubtedly the best means available. In terms of ability, he obviously dominated over Xiao Yongnian, yet still behaved seriously and obediently, not putting on any airs because of his superior ability. Everyone had a spiritual talisman attached respectively. Because Ling Han only showed cultivation of the flower blossom tier, and no one here was capable of identifying his true ability, a spiritual talisman of flower blossom level was naturally slapped onto him. It was as if a mosquito had landed on him. What effect would such minuscule weight have on him? However, even if he had had a spiritual talisman on the level of spiritual infant tier stuck onto him, it also would have been all right. With his terrifyingly powerful physique, at most, it would have been like an egg's weight had been added on. But others did not have this kind of physique, and so had to stimulate their origin power to resist the weight. This was not something as simple as delivering a palm strike or throwing a punch. One had to continuously resist, and this would greatly exhaust one's reserves of origin power. Furthermore, most cultivators did not cultivate body arts. It was fine if they had to stand in the horse stance for 2 to 4 hours, but as time passed, even if they were not short on origin power, their bodies would still feel weary. And what caused their hair to stand on ends was the fact that they had to maintain the horse stance for a whole day and night. In the meantime, they could not rest, eat, nor drink. In merely half a day's time, 17 people could not last, and were subsequently thrown out of the barracks. And when the day ended, a total of 49 people had been cast out. It had only been a day, and about a tenth of the participants had been disqualified. Ling Han was learning. In martial arts and alchemy, he was a genius, but in commanding and training troops, he was still a blank piece of paper, endlessly soaking in experience. Actually, establishing his own nation was still extremely beneficial, as power of the nation could greatly increase his battle prowess and speed up the rate of his cultivation. Although he was advancing very quickly at the moment, that was because he had walked this path once before in his last life. But once he stepped into the immortal realm, even if he was unprecedentedly talented and a genius, he would definitely no longer be able to maintain this rate of advancement. I'll let Fatima hold the fort first. If he can no longer manage, then I'll step up. However, even after we reach the immortal realm, I will still have to consider establishing my own country and speed up the rate of my cultivation. In the immortal realm, it would naturally be even more difficult to establish one's own country, because everyone knew the benefits of establishing one's own country. As a result, parties with even the slightest bit of power would be fighting tooth and nail to establish their own nations. The competition would be incredibly fierce. Chapter 739. Conflict. Henyi. Henyi. After 10 days, half of the people was already eliminated. After 2 months, there might not be even half of that number that could remain here. Yet precisely after these 10 days, those that were left were the ones not only with better tenacity and strength, but also displaying the initial fostering of military discipline. Although they were still not comparable with experienced soldiers, they demonstrated the early signs of being extremely promising. 1 month later, the elimination rate had dropped drastically. There were still 100 people who managed to stay. 3 days later, all of you will be separated into 10 small groups, and each group will be assigned to carry out a task. I shall then assess you and give the score, and the group with the lowest score will then be eliminated," announced Xiao Yongyan. Everyone was startled by this, and even more so felt it somewhat unacceptable. If I am being assigned to a group full of incompetent teammates, wouldn't I be affected and be doomed to fail as well? They thought. This is precisely a test of the unity and team spirit among your group. If a group can't even coordinate well among themselves, how could we even talk about joining into the army? Xiao Yongyan snorted. I would rather choose a teammate with good rapport over one who is a lone hero. Ling Han secretly nodded. At that time, the cultivation of the 100 veteran soldiers that were headed by the Lunar King were only at the deity transformation tier, yet the concerted efforts of these 100 people actually withstood the aftermath of a battle on the level of the Shattering Void tier. What sheer terror! This was the power of unity. Of course, this group of 100 people certainly must have used some kind of array to combine together their defensive strength. Otherwise, that would also be something unimaginable. How nice it would be if I was able to secretly learn this array, Ling Han thought to himself. Their mission this time was to wipe out a group of bandits. Actually, those bandits used to have legit and lawful businesses, and were the forces of a deity transformation tier. As the army of the Purple Moon Empire swept across, the senior elder of the deity transformation tier was slaughtered, yet others actually chose to surrender. However, recently, the 5 great sects secretly instigated a rebellion among them. They entered into the complex mountainous area and became bandits, and time and again preyed upon the common people and wreaked havoc naturally. They did so with the sole purpose of wrecking the power of nation of the Purple Moon Empire. If there were strifes among the people, it would only bring about a negative impact on the power of the nation. This kind of remnant party with only a few cultivators at the spiritual infant tier was certainly not enough to make the Purple Moon Empire start a real war campaign. Thus, it was being used as a training target for new recruits like them. Frankly, even if that deity transformation tier senior elder of this gang of bandits was still alive, Ling Han could also single-handedly crush them with ease. But this time, for the sake of cultivating the team play within their group, Ling Han also did not intend to make any move to showcase his strength, and decided to honestly behave as per his flower blossom tier. They were being imparted with knowledge of an array that could fuse the strength of 10 people, achieving a 50% power. Don't think that it's merely 50%, for a cooperative attack, it had always been the more the people the poorer the effect. Otherwise, as long as they were enough in number, wouldn't body refining tier warriors also be able to kill shattering void tier ones? In reality, there was only the heaven tier elites who could rely on numbers to crush shattering void tier opponents. For the deity transformation tier, no matter how many, they were all only cannon fodder. Imposing aura of the shattering void tier was already enough to eliminate them. Therefore, to retain half of all 10 people's strength could simply be said to be terrifying. They only had 3 days' time. 3 days later, they'd need to depend on this array to meet head on that gang of bandits. Allegedly, the numbers of the spiritual infant tier were no less than 4, exceeding the 2 of their 100-man group. Everyone was a mass of fear and trepidation, putting all efforts and going all out to cultivate. Else not only would they be eliminated, but they would also lose their lives. Every group had their strongest person to act as the formation's eye, merging the strength of the other 9 together and taking command. Ling Han's strength was the strongest, so he naturally served as his team's leader, taking up the duty of being the crux of the array. The strength of every group was well balanced. For instance, as to the formidable strength of 2 individual spiritual infant tier, the teammates they were assigned in respect of holistic strength would need to be inferior to other groups. Without doubt, Zhu Xian'er would not possibly be assigned to the same group with Ling Han. There was only a total of 6 cultivators at the flower blossom tier and above, so, of course, they would all be split to each lead a separate group, while the rest of the other 4 groups didn't even have anyone at the flower blossom tier to assume command. But they also did not have to confront anyone at the spiritual infant tier, as there was a fixed task arranged for every group. Those groups that were weak would be assigned to fend off random soldiers, and the results would not be affected because of this reason. 3 days later they set out. That gang of bandits was not far from them, only half a day's travel. Upon reaching the place, Xiao Yongnian then commanded them to launch their attack. It was also the first time Ling Han witnessed the styles of attack of the Purple Moon Empire. Before this, he was looking upon it from the perspective of the 5 great sects, but now, becoming a puny private of the Purple Moon Empire, he get to personally participate in it. Feeling was naturally different. A group made up of 10 people was practically all-conquering. Now, after layering the strength of the 10 and striking out with half their combined power, even the weakest group would possess the combat strength of the Flower Blossom tier. All the way, they advanced with an overpowering force, forcing out the 4 spiritual infant tier elites of the bandits, which sparked a fierce battle. Ling Han's performance was quite moderate as he merely elevated his battle prowess to roughly about 2 battle stars of the spiritual infant tier, leading his 9 teammates to engage the opponents. The fight went on for close to 3 days. In the end, these bandits' forces were thoroughly wiped out. The armed forces also paid the price of 7 killed in battle, while 18 were injured as well. Taking into account that there was altogether only 100 of them, and moreover that the number of elites was much less, this combat success was practically amazing. Even Ling Han also nodded in approval. This was definitely a typical example of a match where the weak defeated the strong. If he were to similarly lead such a large group of people to battle, unless he displayed his true prowess, it would only cause the whole troop to completely perish. 7 people actually died. Xiao Yongnian's face was grim. You lot are really too useless. Among these 7, 3 killed were in Gong Fei Yang's team, 2 killed were in Su Chengwen's team, and another 2 killed in Jian Qizheng's team. Don't think I have not noticed. Were it not for you lot coveting merits in extreme, would your teammates have died? Gong Fei Yang and Su Chengwen were both at the spiritual pedestal tier. When they heard such words, they could only admit their faults. How would they dare to refute a spiritual infant tier elite? But Jian Qizheng was actually that old man in the spiritual infant tier, and he gave a snort, then retorted, with the sacrifice of 3 spiritual ocean tier cultivators, we have slain a spiritual infant tier 1. He was an impressive spiritual infant tier elite, entirely worthy of being the number 1 ace in this training camp. To actually be dismissed now. How did you expect him to accept it? He swept his sleeves out and remarked, Want me to leave? Also fine, hand over a complete 8th tier cultivation technique. You think I am willing to suffer here? All cultivators fought alone. Hence they were used to living in an unconstrained manner. Many naturally could not adapt to the lifestyle of a military camp. Xiao Yongnian laughed with a sneer and countered, You did not even pass through the new recruit training, yet still want to ask for cultivation techniques. Are you referring to me? Jian Qizhang said thickly. If you don't hand out the cultivation technique, I shall then slaughter every single one of you. He then drew forth a black-colored sword, which looked just like an evil blade. There was already a dark aura twining around the sword's blade, looking incomparably frightening. Chapter 740. Seventh Elder of the Yu Family. Henyi. Henyi. Xiao Yongnian put both his hands behind his back and challenged him. Are you seeking death? Ha 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 ha, I have hidden my actual strength in these recent days all along, yet you. Jian Qizhang laughed while pointing his finger at Xiao Yongnian. I have had you thoroughly figured out and learned of your actual strength already. Furthermore, I have also distinctly seen through the secret to this array of cooperative attack, so in my eyes, there are weaknesses everywhere and it's a piece of cake to break such an array. I am giving you the last chance. Hand over the cultivation technique if you don't want to die by my hand, he demanded in a stern voice, his expression absolutely horrifying. He gave the black sword in his hand a jerk, and immediately, the fearful aura circulated. Xiao Yongnian could not help the abrupt change in his expression. This person was already at the great perfection of the spiritual infant tier, and moreover had a frightening spirit tool, so his battle prowess absolutely exceeded 10 stars. While he was only at the 7th layer of the spiritual infant tier, his battle prowess was also only 8 stars, and he was absolutely not his match. There were not many geniuses among the military officers of the Purple Moon Empire, but in the case of drawn-out combat at close range, they had all developed an ironclad discipline. Teamwork was also well coordinated. More skilled in fighting on a battlefield, they could perfectly layer up the combat strength of many people and triumph over an enemy that originally could not possibly be defeated. However, individual combat strength, they were really mediocre unless they attained the level of king or at least general. At least those could battle an opponent 5 battle stars superior to themselves, and their battle prowess would be monstrous. The problem was, he was only by himself now, and these new recruits had just received training, so could they be of any use? And the opponent was even aware of certain secret combinations of the array, which were extremely easy to break. The lot of you return to the training camp at once. He came to a prompt decision. Instructor! Everyone shouted. Obey the command. Xiao Yongnian barked sternly. Jian Qizhang laughed scornfully as he jeered. Want to leave? Hang, no one can leave. He would not want to be pursued everywhere and killed by the elites of the Purple Moon Empire. Thus he wanted to kill off everyone to silence them in that way. Naturally, no one would know about what happened today. Run! Xiao Yongnian shouted. I will hold him back. Would you be able to hold me back? Jian Qizhang sneered as he raised his black sword and held it high, but he did not strike it downwards, and was appearing to be seeking a target. Everyone's hearts were full of alarm and fright. This was the combat strength of a peak-level spiritual infant tier. With a spirit tool in his hands, who could oppose him? This was practically like he could look at anyone and that person would die, so how could they not feel intimidated? Ling Han prepared to strike forth. Everyone had trained together for 2 months, so no matter what, they had also developed certain camaraderie. Wang! At this moment, a terrifying aura whisked by, drawing a feeling of constriction in everyone's heart. It was so uncomfortable that they felt like spitting blood. An old man inconspicuously appeared, unimposing in appearance, and indifferently asked, Which one of you is Ling Han? Jian Qizhang was just being smug. Abruptly being interrupted, he immediately felt extreme displeasure in his heart, and he coldly uttered, Who are you? Is it your place to interrupt? Pah! As soon as he finished, his whole body exploded into pieces. Could it be that he was at the deity transformation tier or even high-level deity transformation tier? Senior, may I know how should I address you? Xiao Yongnian asked as he clasped his fists. Although this old man had helped them got rid of a big disaster, Ling Han was precisely a new recruit under him, and this old man was evidently not here to have tea. As an instructor, he was duty-bound to protect the troops under him. The old man's glance swept across Xiao Yongnian, and he indifferently responded, My surname is Yu. I do not intend to make an enemy of the Purple Moon Empire. As such, hand over Ling Han and I shall take my leave right away. Yu. In a flash, it immediately dawned on Ling Han was the 7th elder of the Yu family. Before this, at the Mystery Realm, Ling Han had killed an arrogant bastard named Yu Xianing. Strictly speaking, it was Hun Yo who killed him, but undoubtedly the score was counted unto him, and now they came to seek revenge. He was a senior heaven-tier elite. Absolutely not someone Xiao Yongnian could equal. But precisely as the seventh elder of the Yu family had said, he had no intention to go against the Purple Moon Empire. Hence, he did not make any move to annihilate them. Otherwise, how would a heaven-tier elite be so obliging? Yet if Xiao Yongnian were to adamantly hold out, the seventh elder of the Yu clan inevitably would not show mercy. Unwilling to offend did not mean unable to offend. After all, this world was still not belonging to the Purple Moon Empire, and who would dare to look down upon the five great sects, who knew how solid and profound their power base was? Ling Han resolutely stepped out from the crowd. He was the one who'd caused the trouble, so, naturally he could not let others be afflicted with the consequences. Besides, Xiao Yongnian totally could not hold off this disaster at all, so why let him get killed in vain? Ling Han, go back. Xiao Yongnian immediately ordered as he caught sight of Ling Han. Ling Han gestured with his hand as he said, "Instructor, this person is the seventh elder of the Yu clan, with cultivation level of the heaven tier." Pooh! Everyone gasped in shock. There was only a few shattering void tier elites in the world, and beneath the shattering void tier was the heaven tier. One finger of the latter was enough to get rid of all of them. Xiao Yongnian was merely slightly dazed as he spoke with resolution. "Nonsense, of course I would safeguard the troops under Moonless I am dead, or else no one can so much as touch a hair on you. Although I do not want to oppose the Purple Moon Empire, since you are determined not to realize the gravity of your mistake, then go die." The seventh elder of the Yu clan struck forth, slapping in the direction of Xiao Yongnian. Pang! A palm struck over and landed on the ground, revealing a deep hole, but Xiao Yongnian was nowhere to be seen. The gaze of the seventh elder of the Yu clan swept across, revealing a deep expression as he said, "You are unable to defend yourself, yet you still dare to meddle in other people's business." Ling Han put Xiao Yongnian down. Just now, were it not for him moving just in time, bringing Xiao Yongnian to a side, the latter certainly would have had a similar fate as Jian Qizheng, turned into an utterly indiscernible corpse. Xiao Yongnian was astonished from Ling Han's move. He'd already discovered that Ling Han's strength was actually way above his because he absolutely could not possibly have dodged that strike. "At least I am still alive now, right?" Ling Han smilingly said, and as he let down Xiao Yongnian, he added, "Instructor, let me handle it." The seventh elder of the Yu clan was also not in a rush to strike out, and said, "You've killed someone from my Yu clan, so you are destined to die. But, I am also a reasonable person, and will let you choose how you are to die. How about it?" It was a female voice full of heroic spirit. "Show yourself!" the seventh elder of the Yu clan shouted again. He unceasingly swiveled his body around, sweeping his gaze all around. "Dare to stop me yet do not dare to show yourself? Hung, then I also couldn't care less, and will just directly kill off this person." He pointed his finger at Ling Han, his killing intent soaring. "Get lost at once, else die." That voice rang out again, pretending to be mysterious. The seventh elder of the Yu clan stared fixedly at Ling Han, and raised his hand. Chapter 741. Reappearance of Hai Niu. Henyi. Henyi. Ling Han's expression turned serious. It was a heaven-tier cultivator, and a high-level one at that, far exceeding even the maximum of his present combat strength. If he were to fight head-on, he would probably sustain serious injuries. Of course, if he were to parry merely one move, he definitely would not die. After all, his physique and recovery ability were both very strong. "Xian, come here." Ling Han beckoned. Naturally, he would not hide in the Black Tower by himself. Fortunately, although Hu Niu and Rabbit followed him over, they were waiting at a distant place, and did not gather here. Presumably, if they were also seen by the seventh elder of the Yu clan, they would also be overlooked. Zhu Xian slowly came over, not daring to move overly swift for fear of triggering a reaction from the seventh elder of the Yu clan. How would the seventh elder of the Yu clan be bothered with Ling Han or Zhu Xian, such puny spiritual infant and flower-blossoming tier cultivators? He was still searching for the whereabouts of that mysterious person. He exclaimed, "Since you would not show yourself, then I shall dismiss my reservations." His raised right hand immediately pressed down in Ling Han's direction. Pa! A person's shadow flew upwards, and strongly slammed into the building structure of the bandits' lair. Pang, 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 directly breaking down about a dozen rooms before coming to a halt. That was the seventh elder of the Yu clan was actually given a resounding slap which sent him flying. Hiss! That old man struggled to scramble to his feet. He only felt that at least about a dozen bones in his body were broken, and he was now forcibly putting them back together using origin power. Otherwise, he would not even be able to get up now. Who was this? Wasn't that too strong? One slap already sent him flying without even giving him time to react. He stared over there fixedly, and only caught sight of a masked person appearing at the spot he had been previously standing at. But even if the face was masked, one could also make out from the figure that the person was actually a lady. Slender and graceful, she could be said to be perfect, were it not for asterisk being indeed rather flat. Everyone was both startled and delighted, even though they had yet to know the identity of this masked lady. For her to stand against the seventh elder of the Yu clan, it should be a good thing, right? Ling Han's gaze swept across that incomparably flat bosom of the masked lady, and blurted out unwittingly, "Hi Niao!" There really weren't that many women with such powerful strength and the chest still so flat. "If you dare persist in spouting nonsense, I will kill you," the masked lady snapped coldly. Ling Han bared his teeth and queried, "You've recovered your memories?" If it had been Hai Niao, then she would have acted silly and cute, but were it Helian Sun Shui, then she would have acted high and mighty as befitting a senior heaven-tier elite. Judging from the present circumstances, evidently, it appeared to be the latter. But why would she step forth and come to his aid? Could it be that she felt that it was more satisfying to kill him with her own hands? Then again, they also did not have much of a score to settle, merely that he had once deceived her, but it was already such a long time ago, why not just dismiss the animosity with a smile? After all, we have lived together for a long time. Helian Sun Shui did not deign to answer, but merely stared coldly at the seventh elder of the Yu clan and uttered, "Just now I told you to scram and you didn't, now you still want to leave." The seventh elder of the Yu clan clasped his hands together as a gesture of respect and offered a truce. "Honorable Lord, this person has killed a member of my Yu clan, so it stands to reason that I have come to avenge his death." He felt that this murderous fury ought to have been directed at himself, but not knowing where or how, this Hai Niao seemed to have let her focus gone awry and turned haywire along the way, and actually let him, the real culprit, off the hook, and shifted onto the seventh elder of the Yu clan. "Wish you good luck," he thought. The seventh elder of the Yu clan was also infuriated. They were both similarly of high-level heaven tier, and he had already set down his stance so low. On top of that, he'd also been given a resounding slap by her, so what more did she want? He flicked his sleeves and stated boldly, "Honorable Lord, I am also not one easy to be trifled with." He drew out a green-colored stone tablet. On its surface were closely woven patterns, filled with an ancient air. Ling Han made an exclamation of surprise, knowing that this was certainly an antique. The skill of forging spirit tools had long since been lost, so the cultivators now all nurtured their weapons with the martial willpower and origin power of their own body. Then, as time passed, it naturally became a spirit tool, one with the cultivator, and drew forth their most powerful strength and full capability. But in ancient times, spirit tools were forged by weaponsmiths, with the patterns being inscribed using engraving, which meant the spirit tool would be able to wield its utmost power no matter in whose hands it was, and could even possibly surpass the cultivator's level. A heaven-tier elite not using the spirit tool he nurtured himself actually drew out an ancient spirit tool. It showed that the power of this spirit tool was definitely above the spirit tool of his own. It could not be underestimated. So, it was inevitable that Ling Han, given his nature, would feel a bit of an itch, wanting to suck away this stone tablet with the heaven transformation bowl. Most likely, the rock spirit would salivate as well. Nevertheless, Helian Sun Shui was totally unconcerned, putting one of her hands behind her back, and only leveled her outstretched right hand as she fearlessly declared, "Dealing with you one hand is enough." The seventh elder of the Yu clan was seething with anger. He'd long made a name for himself, and heaven tier was also considered the top existence of this world. Who would not greet him respectfully after meeting him? Yet now, to actually be looked down upon in such a manner, it made him feel a sense of utter humiliation and disgrace. He drew out the stone tablet, and wang, this stone tablet immediately flew up, vigorously emitting extraordinary light in midair while also rapidly enlarging into something like a small mountain peak, which then smashed towards Hellion Sun Shui. No fancy moves, only one word: smash. Hellion Sun Shui's expression revealed a slight tinge of astonishment, for she could sense that this stone tablet's weight now was surprisingly heavy, reckoning it to be even more terrible than a mountain peak's. Ancient people's technique of forging weapons was really amazing. It looked to be the forceful refining of a real mountain into a smaller size, and to be used to directly smash on anyone as and when needed. When the weight reached a certain extent, smashing down would be just like the world's most formidable attack. She snorted and her body transformed into a thunderbolt, and with unparalleled swiftness struck forth. So fast. Ling Han only felt a blur before his eyes as he totally could not keep track of Hellion Sun Shui's figure. Given that once he had cultivated the Thunderclap Ninth Heaven, his speed became barely comparable with Heaven Tier. Then Hellion Sun Shui as a Heaven Tier elite after mastering the Thunderclap Ninth Heaven. How terrifying could her speed be? Even with how superior a Shattering Void Tier cultivator was, with her speed, she should at least be a match for them, right? In a flash, Hellion Sun Shui materialized in front of the seventh elder of the Yu clan, with her delicately tender snowy white hand directly struck out and pressed onto his forehead. The seventh elder of the Yu clan hastily raised his hand to ward off the blow, a dumbstruck expression on his face as Hellion Sun Shui's speed had far exceeded his expectations. This was too swift already, so swift that he practically didn't even have time to react. Pong, pong, pong. Two mighty Heaven Tier cultivators were locked in fierce combat. But in fact, it was entirely the seventh elder of the Yu clan being beaten up, with absolutely no chance to fight back. Strong, really strong. Ling Han thought to himself. Hellion Sun Shui was, in fact, a genius of the sea race. Not only that her origin power had advanced to the Heaven Tier, but even with regards to physical skills, she was in no way inferior. This kind of dual cultivation elite naturally could crush origin power cultivators of the same level. Now, she further cultivated a mystical power that strengthened her power even more. It was apparent from a battle between two opponents of the same level how terrifying the strength of the mystical power was. The seventh elder of the Yu clan was boiling with rage, seeing that he could not even touch so much as the side of Hellion Sun Shui, and was only being ruthlessly beaten. He then exploded in a fit of overwhelming rage as he summoned the stone tablet over, and had it smashing down his way. You going to dodge or not? If not, I will smash you together as well. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.